And welcome to day 2 of the AML Summit by Firmcheck. Yesterday was absolutely incredible. We had such a fantastic response. So many people talking in the chat and collaborating, answering each other's questions. It was fantastic. Today, we're going to be covering why education is important in your firm, how to facilitate it, and then you get to see me again in the afternoon because you haven't already seen enough of me talking about the AML fundamentals. We'll cover history, laws, and basic principles. My name's Sophie. I'm the Events and Community Manager at Firmcheck. I like to say that this role is friend making and party planning. So it is a joy to be making friends with all of you today. And thank you for attending. The schedule. We'll do a quick recap of yesterday, actually. So put in the chat if you were with us yesterday, a little hand up. It would be great to see how many of you are going to join us for the whole summit. Yesterday, we covered the Firmcheck maturity model. We also had a great response to that and a few questions and queries and people collaborating on where they felt their maturity was at. We had Glenn Collins of the ACCA talking about why AML is important. And it was great in that session. We flagged 7 complaints about HMRC. We have recorded those. We also met Alex Falcon of Soaring Falcon, talking about how she manages AML at her firm. And we had David Winch for a big 1-hour session that went down a treat for all of you. That was heaps of really positive feedback that I've passed on to him. He was really pleased that you all found great value in it. And the workbook. Now, in the excitement of yesterday, I missed to tell you that in the workbook at the end of the day, there is a piece for you to write the actions that you would want to take in your firm immediately. So the actions that you believe are leading to non-compliance and actions that you want to implement in the long term. These points are important at the end of the day, as the last session on the 3rd day is putting all these points into a project plan. So if you didn't get to that yesterday, do so today and at the end of the session. So what's on today? You're in your introduction and welcome with me. And then we have Kevin Lord, General Manager of Firmcheck, talking about the importance of AML education for firms. This is based, again, off the AML maturity model and the findings that we had in the importance of education. We have Phil of 2020 talking about how to actually implement education into your firm. And then we received feedback yesterday. We will have a 5-minute T&T session, toilet and tea. But for those that don't require that, stay around. There is a surprise. But afterwards, we have a fireside chat with Jonathan from Raedan, him talking about how he implements education in his firm. And then we have the workshop that I just mentioned about AML and the history and the laws. I really get to live my legally blonde moment and talk to you about law. So that is going to be really exciting. And that's for day 3 as well. You've got the schedule in your handout. I believe for those that are new today, you will have a pop out in your handouts for your workbook. So pick that up. Each session has a page dedicated to it for you to make notes there. So just some quick housekeeping. So the sessions are being recorded and you will receive a recording by the end of the day. A little bit of lag on yesterday's. We were just getting into the rhythm of the summit. So the recording from yesterday will be made available to you shortly. You can leave and come back. You don't need to stay for the whole day, but if you do, that's great. These are sessions designed to work in with your day-to-day format for your firm. So just a little quick 2 hours, and then you get to go back into your firm and implement the changes that you've learned. Ask questions in the chat. So we had awesome response in the chat yesterday. They've all been reviewed, and some of those questions that went unanswered yesterday, Lucy from Calathea will be getting in touch with you just to give you those answers. So as the thoughts come up, chuck them in. We are also monitoring the chat too, just to make sure that the community answers are correct, that are being shared. So for those, we will be getting in touch also. So ask away. But like as well, the chat we received some feedback that it was a little bit distracting from the fabulous content that we were showing. You can remove the chat from your view. So you can pop it out in the top right part of the chat. There's a square with an arrow that means pop out, but you can, and then close it from there, but you can also bring the chat, slide it to the right of the screen. CPD certificates. This summit is CPD verified. There is a lot of you, I'm glad to say. So we'll get them to you by the end of the week, hopefully. Just the magnitude of everybody that we have to get through. Okay, fantastic. So if there's any other questions I've missed, as I said, put them in the chat, remove the chat, whatever, go for gold. I'm now going to segue and invite Kevin Lord onto the stage to talk about the education part of the AML maturity model. He should be wandering in any moment. Debbie, you can post the certificates on LinkedIn. I would encourage you to do so. There's a certificate portion on your LinkedIn page that you can submit those under. I'll ask the Firmcheck team to maybe put a link in the chat as to how to do that. Good morning, Kev.
Good morning. Good morning, Sophie. Good morning, everyone. Really delighted to see so many returning names and keep the engagement up. I just want to echo Sophie's sort of energy. That all of us sort of off air and yesterday afternoon we were just sort of buzzing with the reaction and how engaging everyone was. So keep it coming, because you're certainly fueling us guys behind the scenes as well. So it's great.
That's awesome. I'll take away these slides and leave you to the stage.
Okay, so good morning, everyone, and like I say, keep the chat coming, and I would love your engagement as we go along. My very brief session just now is about the importance of AML education and education in general. It's a topic that I'm really passionate about, actually, in all terms of work. How important knowledge and development and learning and development in particular plays such a huge role in all aspects of work, really. So I take a keen interest in this as a senior leader in a software company, and so I'm looking to pass on some help and tips, and also set up Phil's session later on as well. So hopefully you will find it useful. And we've got a couple of polls and stuff like that. Wouldn't be an online session if there weren't any polls. So yeah, Sophie gave us a recap of the sessions yesterday. I just wanted to do a quick recap about the AML maturity model that we launched. And if you've not seen the maturity model, I'll probably ask our colleagues behind the scenes just to pop in the guide into the handouts area where you can download it. I do believe there was an issue with Firefox yesterday, and that's why you can download it. But if you've not downloaded it yet, please download your version of our maturity framework that we launched yesterday. And what we were introducing is the 5 stages of AML maturity in accounting firms in the UK, really. And you've got these 5 levels, and those that were here yesterday, you'll remember I asked you to score yourselves and then introduce the model and see if you were somewhere different in the model. So level 1, undefined, AML compliance is an afterthought, you don't really do much. Number 2, limited, it's kind of ad hoc, disorganized, and you do some, you might not do it all. Level 3 is you do enough to be competent, but not in a systematic, structured way. It's very time consuming. It might live on numerous platforms or systems, and it's a burden in the practice. You then come to level 4 and 5 is where you've got systems in place. Your knowledge internally is fairly strong, and you've got things working really, really, really well. And then level 5 is it's a core component of what you do. You actually find different client services through your AML education and mindset within the practice. So that's a super brief summary. And again, I think your ability to download the report came up on the screen there. But this whole day and this whole section is about education, AML education, and why it plays such an important role. And through all the chats yesterday, you know, we had Glenn from ACC, David Winch yesterday, you know, it was kind of all about knowledge. It's all about understanding what the rules and regulations are, but also how you can you know, improve those and improve that knowledge. And so if I take each level as it is, and bear in mind we've had this maturity model reviewed by AML experts and industry experts. So if we take what level 1 is, undefined here, it's kind of all about knowledge. It's all about understanding. Do you know what AML is? Do you know what the regulations are? Do you know what you have to do there? Are you recording that information? Where are you storing it? That kind of thing. So people at level 1 really, you know, this very start of their AML journey is actually that education journey. It's not actually doing the process of AML. It's understanding what to do and being more active, you know, mentally and putting a commitment into knowing what is going to happen. So that's level number 1. If we come to level number 2 again, you know, you're kind of limited there. You're doing some AML compliance. It's quite ad hoc. It's quite disorganized. But again, if we pull out the actual wording of the framework itself, you know, upskilling your staff, there's another constant mention of education of what AML and the requirements are. Level 3 again, you are competent and you know you're probably ticking a lot of the boxes should you ever be audited. But again, you know, when it comes to what the industry expects from you, all staff are trained at least once a year and you're keeping a record of it. 6 of the fundamental elements to AML compliance is AML training for the relevant staff, and you're keeping a record of it as well. So underlying through the whole framework and through the whole guidance in the UK is that strong push towards knowing what it is you're doing. Then we go to people who are super, you know, they've got their act together. They're very good. They've got systematic systems in place, and actually what that is the knowledge of the whole firm, the knowledge of your clients, the knowledge of everything that you're doing is in a really, really good and strong place. And then again, coming to the very top level, and we're not expecting everyone to be at level 5, of course, intertwined and throughout the whole framework again, and I'm labouring my point slightly, is, you know, education and knowledge is a fundamental part of what we're doing. So, you know, it's huge when it comes to this, and such I saw a lot of the comments yesterday saying, you know, the guidance is very inconsistent towards the bodies or against all the bodies, but it's really on us, and there's a huge element of what makes you compliant is you know what you're doing, your staff know what you're doing, and you understand the rules and regulations that are in place. So there is a backbone to AML education, and you've got to make it a fundamental part of what you're doing. There is data behind this, of course. You know, we're not just saying that for the sake of it. There is data behind that, and I'll dive into a couple of the charts that we've got. Just to break things up and give my accent, you guys a break from my accent, shall we say? I'm just going to run a couple of polls, if you don't mind, and see what your attitude to it is at the minute. So the first one is, do you think there is good enough AML training opportunities out there? And I'll let that run a little bit. I can see that the results are public and visible to you. So we'll let that run for maybe 30, 40 seconds just to get enough answers here. And we usually wait till about 50% of the audience, and that gives us a good benchmark there. Oh, we're stuck. Here we are, 49%. One more person. Perfect. Okay, so we're round about a third on all of that. You know, there's not a majority consensus there at all. So yeah, some people think there's enough AML training out there. You know, 35% said no, and others are kind of. So there's a bit of work there to be done across the whole industry, I believe. Then just taking that as a benchmark, that there is a AML education there, but are you engaged in it, or do you know where to find it? So there's a bit more work to be done there as well. The next question is that I'm just about to launch now is, how many hours would you say you spend on AML training each year? Is it up to 5 hours, between 5 and 10? Do you do 10 plus hours? Bear in mind, if you're coming to the AML Summit for all 3 days, that probably counts as 9 hours. So you're probably doing more than most. And again, I'll just let that run for the next sort of 30 seconds or so. If anything, this is proven that it's there is no bias towards any one thing. Again, fairly split. Most people do up to 5 hours, so a little bit less per year. The lower answer is close to 50%, and then the other 50% is split between over 5 and over 10 hours there. And then the final question to ask you is, how often are you and your employees doing the actual training? So are you splitting that 5 hours? Is it just a block? Are you doing it several times a day? Are you doing it once a month? That kind of thing there. And and then we'll break that down to our generic research that we've done to complete our framework model. So again, I'll just let that go to close to 50%. I'm kind of stuck on 38. It's getting there slowly. Okay, 5 more seconds, and then that'll give us. So again, what's looking at it, it's usually several times a year or once a year. It's probably not for quite a lot of people an active thing, a monthly thing, or there. So which is no surprise to us. Okay, so thank you very much, and you can go back to the chat area and leave the polls running. And to be fair, you're not too dissimilar to the research that we've done to build this maturity model. Does your firm offer regular AML training for employees? 46% said yes, you get regular training. 47% said yes, but it's occasional training. It is there. I would guess that's probably quite reactive than a proactive training plan, and I'll go into a bit of that in a second. But also worryingly, if you like, 10% say that they do not offer regular training for employees, and bear in mind, this is a legal requirement here, and if you were audited and you're not offering staff training, then that will be classed as a finding for you and for your firm as well. So there's just shy of 10% of firms out there not doing any sort of training at all, if you like, which is something that has to improve. Then we go to, what methods does your firm use to provide AML training? Again, 56% of those asked are online courses and webinars. Again, pop in the chat if you think these numbers are right, or you do something else to deliver your AML training. 20% are in-house workshops, so perhaps you're doing that internally. Or a quarter are external training providers. So Lucy, that's in the background from Calathea, will be quite happy to hear that. That a quarter of firms outsource this training and get people in to do that as well. So I again just wanted to highlight that the information that we're giving you is not just based on my opinion there. So I'm just going to spend the next sort of 10 minutes again just looking at education and what it is that you need to be sort of training on. I won't go into too much technical parts of the AML rules and regulations. We've got a couple of sessions about that later today. And also it feels like I'm teeing up Phil's session later on, Phil from 2020, which is a great group that I've known and worked with for many years. I know Billy really well there. So, I'm kind of teeing up his session as well. And like I say, it's a bit of a passion of mine as well, is how do we get that education out there, and how do we get ourselves and our staffing engaged in that, especially around the topic of AML. You know, I don't know how many people have worked in the corporate world, but we all used to do annual training of how to lift a box and place it down, and the engagement levels of there were usually pretty dire until someone hurt themselves. So I just wanted to touch on that for the final 10 minutes or so. So the first thing that we really should look at is what content to deliver and where to find that. And in terms of AML, you know, there is a lot of information out there, and there is it's difficult to find, difficult to put your hand on that. And I thought Glenn's chat yesterday was really sort of encouraging when Glenn was talking about the ACCA and all the tools and resources that they have. I think the first point of call is to know what it is that you want to educate and make it relevant for your staff. So, you know, who is your regulatory body? What is it that they look for in terms of their firms? What kind of training do they provide? It's probably a really good starting place. You know, if you're an ACCA member, you probably want to go and see what information that they have, how they store that, how they're looking for it. Are you training your staff on the right place? So, you know, I know the accounting bodies and HMRC, for example, get quite a lot of stick, but also I would challenge that and say they do deliver quite a lot of fantastic material out there. You just have to try and find it, of course. But ACCA, ICW, AAT, whatever your regulatory body, I know the ICB do you know, really strong on AML and anti-money laundering and fraud in particular. So reach out to your accounting body first and foremost. Find out what it is that they're looking for, and do they have the tools and the resources available. And you know, hearing Glenn yesterday, you know, the ACCA certainly has that there as well. The second area that you might want to look at as well, and you know, sort of 25% of those responses did say that they went to external training providers. I'm sticking Calathea and David Winch in there. They're perhaps not total training facilitators, but I think what the guys like that do, and we've got Lucy on in the background here answering questions, and she's doing a Q&A at the end. I think what they really give you is really good practical, almost case studies and hands-on knowledge of what to do in terms of an audit, and how to structure your risk assessments, and how to train you that way. So I would say that the bodies and things like that are really good at what the requirements are and what the legislation is and things like that. But really getting hands-on real-time experience from people that have been in the trenches, that know what it is, that can give you real-life case studies, makes it much more relevant to you and can be much more personalized to your service. So if you've not heard of the guys, then definitely reach out to them, and they can give you more hands-on. And that this is education. You know, it's not just support. It is education and knowledge, and hearing their stories and listening to the things that happen is really important there. And then you've got the software vendors, and I've been in the account software game for quite a while now. And one of our key strategies to the firms that do try and engage their clients is having a really strong education focus there. Not just education on how to use the technology and how that would improve your AML processes as a practice, but also, you know, we do a lot of talking to the accounting bodies and to the consultants, and we share a lot of that content and that material. I can see a couple of the questions coming in about Firmcheck's training. Yes, we do have training on AML. The link's just there. You can sign up. There is no charge to our training. You do get CPT verification for passing the courses as well. So it's a wide range in there, and sometimes, you know, the accounting bodies material might be quite lengthy. It might be, you know, really specific, or not enjoyable to go through. Whereas us as vendors, we've probably got the experience and the know-how just to make it a little bit more engaging. So that's just 3 ideas of what content and where to try and find that content, especially in terms of AML. I just want to touch on the people part of it as well. And yes, AML is important, but how do we get how do we get staff engaged in what we're doing and delivering that? And again, like I say, it's a bit of a pet project of mine, and I'm probably setting up the 2020 session straight after the first session after it. You know, I've done a bit of work and again, part of the vendor community, and you guys will all know that there is a bit of a capacity crisis at the minute in the accounting world. You know, struggling to get staff, struggling to a lot of vacancies out there, struggling to get good staff. People are leaving the profession. And digging into that a little bit, and this is, I'm getting these stats from Accounting Web's own intelligence data reports. There's a link to it there. They're doing 4 reports this year. The first one was on capacity crisis, and you know what is causing this capacity crisis. And you can see, actually, you know, a lot of firm owners or people working firms think a large part of that is down to not having the appropriate staff, or staff having the inappropriate skill sets, or staff are not quite qualified enough to do the stuff that's needing to be done. And if you caveat that with the top 10 reasons accountants are actually leaving the profession, so looking at the mindset of the people that are leaving, actually they are leaving because there's a lack of opportunity to advance in their career. They don't feel challenged enough. They're just doing repetitive tasks daily. Perhaps senior colleagues are refusing to let go of those tasks, and they don't feel that they're developing their current skill set. However, you know, looking at a DEX UK accountant survey that was published last year, you know, a lot of people get into accounting because of the opportunities of job progression. And the reason I put this information up here is people want to learn. They want the education. They want to learn new stuff. And as firm owners or people working practices, or perhaps, you know, you've got employees, you've got staff there that want to learn these skills and want to do it. I think we just need to put a process in place of the right content and the right material that's relevant to them, but also a culture of learning and a culture of development, so that staff can take on these responsibilities and really fill the gaps with the capacity crisis. Listen, I work in sales and you know, in sales and marketing. It's always easier to sell to your current customers because you've spent that time and money getting them in the first place. Anyone that's done recruitment or tried to find staff know it's time consuming, it's costly. You may as well educate the people that you've got and educate them in the right way, so that they can be really efficient in your practice there as well. So I've just got a couple of tips on my knowledge, filling some time here again before the next chat, because I think you'll get a lot from it from the 2020 guys. But just some tips how I think you can encourage engagement, especially in AML training. You know, you saw some of the comments yesterday about AML being, you know, a pain or confusing or a bit, you know, a bit of a time vampire, if you like, internally. I've just got some tips on how to sort of get that engagement levels up, and things that you can do to spread out that knowledge and to make use of it in the practice. So I think, first of all, you do need to create a culture of learning and development in the practice, first and foremost. And I'm a keen reader of Daniel Pink, and if anyone's not read Daniel Pink's book about drive and about motivation, I strongly encourage you to do so. And his 3 pillars of what motivates people, one is autonomy to do their job. The second one is being aligned to company goals and everyone going in the right direction. But the third one is a commitment to personal development. You know, so I think if you create a culture of learning development in the practice, you will have not only yourself but your staff all motivated to do really well in their job and learn new skills and take on more responsibilities there as we go. I think you need to integrate AML into your onboarding and annual training plans. It's, you know, some of the guys say that, you know, you do it occasionally. I think as soon as someone comes into the practice, you know, you'll have onboarding training that you do, getting used to your systems and your way of working, your processes. So integrate AML into your onboarding. Perhaps have them as part of your annual reviews or personal development sessions, you know, that you have. Hey, listen, you're not engaging in your AML training, that kind of thing. Promote an AML awareness campaign, maybe having an AML month where you are having different sort of team challenges, something that's memorable, something events where you're sharing experiences with you, and not just keep it to like, hey, can you do that AML training at the end of the week or once a month or whatever that is. So have an AML awareness campaign, talk about it in your newsletters, in your social media, things like that, and really create an event from it as well. You should incorporate AML into any team meetings or internal communications that you do. It shows commitment to you that AML is important to your practice. It's a dedicated space to share updates and embrace peer-to-peer learning. Empower your staff to be AML ambassadors. It shouldn't just be your MLRO or the senior partner in the firm. And by empowering staff to do that, you're giving them a visual pathway to developing there. You're maybe enhancing their soft skills, their presentation skills. So if you have a junior member of staff, you might want to say, hey, at the next team meeting, can you do a little presentation on Firmcheck's AML Summit, for example, and what you learned, and take that away. But really empower staff to become AML ambassadors. And then my final bit, just to get that engagement levels up, is reward and recognize compliance efforts. If someone does something good in terms of their AML or they raise a SAR or things like that, don't shy away from it. It's good. Reward and recognize that, and really what you're doing there is you're giving positive reinforcement to the staff that AML is important to you, and it's something that you should be proud of, and some things that you want to develop moving forward. Okay, so that's kind of enough of me. I can see Sophie coming back online. I hope you found it useful. It's a real sort of a passionate project of mine, education, especially in the accountancy practices. And yeah, I'll be online later to talk to Jonathan. So thank you.
Yeah, you'll be here the whole day, and even after, to do a demo of the Firmcheck product, which is really exciting. While you were talking, I was having a think back about when we started researching the UK market and coming here as Firmcheck. It was July. I was in my container cabin on a farm in New Zealand, very different life. But we were looking at the education options that were available in the UK and did find them to be quite inconsistent. There wasn't a lot that was comprehensive and covered enough for accountants to feel like they had a good handle on AML. So definitely the Firmcheck resources we're really proud of. We have an AI man, which is something quite innovative. It's a little bit distracting sometimes, but he's great. But there was a drop down for that Firmcheck e-learning. It is free. And I saw a comment somewhere. Angela, I completed the introduction to AML for accountants yesterday with Firmcheck and have my certificate. I found it helpful. Thank you. And I just wanted to note, thanks, Debbie, in the chat. She's answering questions. She's doing the most in there. So thank you, Debbie. I really appreciate you engaging with everyone. But thanks, Kev, on that presentation. I really appreciate it. When we were looking at bringing in education as part of the Firmcheck's plan into the UK, 2020 Innovation was one of the people in bodies that we looked at and were like, they're kind of doing it good. So it is with great pleasure I can introduce Phil from 2020 Innovation, who will be coming onto the stage shortly. When it comes to additional speakers for the summit, and partners as well, we really wanted to find businesses that made sense to have here and to participate here and have something valuable to say when it comes to AML, not just simply coming on and trying to sell you stuff. So we've been really careful about who we curate and what they bring to the table. Is walking in. He's getting there. So I can answer some questions just while we're waiting for him to come along. Oh no, and he's there. Hi.
Hi there, Sophie.
So there was just a question. Can I ask how much it costs to sign up to Firmcheck e-learning training? It's free. We love free things. But there is 2020 Innovation. They have webinars on AML that are fantastic and should be reviewed as well. And we can cover those here too. But I will pass the stage off to you and I will walk away. But ask questions in the chat. There'll be a 5-minute question session at the end. And that's that. How does that sound?
Brilliant. Thank you, Sophie. I'll just share my slides.
Yeah.
So share that.
Perfect.
Hopefully
The recordings for the session will be given by the end of the week, by the way. Perfect. I will walk away. Thanks.
Brilliant. Well, welcome to this next session, how to facilitate education in your team. My name is Phil Brabin. I'm a practice consultant working with 2020 Innovation. For those of you that have not heard of 2020 before, we're an established CPD training provider. So I've been around since the late 90s. We, of course, run a whole range of CPD, but of course, include AML on our program. I believe the next AML webinar that we're running is on the 21st of May with my colleague Dave Norris, which is on topical points and QAD feedback. That's Quality Assurance Department of the ICAW feedback. We also more recently have provide a full range of compliance services, so covering a range of areas, including audit, practice assurance, and of course, under that practice assurance banner, we look at AML compliance as well. So essentially looking at AML compliance from the same perspective as the ICAW's QAD department or ACCA's monitoring unit when we come in to review firms' AML procedures and compliance. As for myself, my background is that of audit. So started in audit, but spent the last 9 years in compliance. So I started working with SWAT UK. That was acquired by Mercia Group, which I'm sure you've heard of. And then, of course, now working with 2020. So essentially working mainly with small and medium-sized firms of accountants to ensure the firms are compliant across a whole range of areas. So that's enough of myself. Let's have a look at what we'll be covering in this session. This session, we're looking at how to make education a part of your team's culture, reduce the burden of undertaking AML training, because I appreciate that at times it can sometimes be perhaps a little dry, and also ensure that that everyone understands AML processes, the importance of education, and also how to implement AML policies and procedures. Now, of course, I'm not looking in this session really at the detail per se. It's more the approach to AML training and what you can perhaps do to ensure that the training you undertake is more effective. Now, I'd like to start just with a couple of short polls. I've got a reasonable appreciation of the room from just the last polls that ran. But the first poll I just want to run is, well, excluding this session, of course. I appreciate that, of course, this is a formal AML training session, but over the last 12 months, I just want to get an idea as to the uptake as to who has undertaken formal AML training, whether that be internal or external. So when I say formal, it's beyond just simply kind of self-reading and so forth. So let's just have a look at that. And you can be honest, of course. And this is, I think that I do appreciate the difficulty sometimes of fitting in CPD. I think client work invariably comes first, and it's not always easy to make time. So I think that's often the reason why sometimes training gets overlooked. But I mean, looking at the polls as it's coming through, I mean, certainly that's in keeping with what I would expect, in that we're looking at 75% have done some formal internal or external training. So that was perhaps more expected. Let's have a look at the second poll I want to look at, though, is in contrast. And this one, if I just read the question, who has submitted a suspicious activity report in the last 12 months to your firm's money laundering reporting officer? Or if you are the firm's money laundering reporting officer, if you're a small practice, if you've submitted a report to the National Crime Agency. I'm just interested in the response to this question. So just give it another 20 seconds just to get a good sense. And looking at those results coming in, I mean, as you can see, we're down around just under 20% of those of you on this call who've submitted a report, which is actually not too bad in percentage terms, I would say. But of course, the vast majority haven't. That the reason I asked this question is because, as part of my role as when I conduct money laundering compliance reviews, it's one of the questions that we ask firms, MLROs, how many reports, how many suspicious activity reports have you received in the last 12 months? And very often the response is none that comes back. And I guess that I mean, there's various ways of looking at this. Now, of course, one extreme is that for some firms, they have great clients, and that would explain why they're not receiving suspicious activity reports. At the other end of the spectrum, I think that, and this is perhaps more the exception. I wouldn't say that this is very common, but you'll have firms that simply have no procedures, that do very little in the way of training with staff, and for that reason, staff are simply unaware of their responsibilities, and that would explain why they're not receiving reports. But I think the more likely answer, I think in most cases for most firms, I think it's not that they don't have procedures, and it's not that they don't do training. The problem being is that the training is not as effective as it should be in terms of raising awareness amongst particularly more junior staff, but in some cases I would go so far as to say even with senior members of the team as well. And that's what I want to look at in this session in terms of just the different types of training, and how we can perhaps actually get to a point where individuals do understand their responsibility, and they do have that awareness as to issues that should be raised and flagged within the firms. So let's have a look at how all firms really should be approaching AML. So this next slide looks at in just the bigger picture, really. So from a compliance perspective, if you are the firm's money laundering reporting officer or compliance officer, then you would be looking at putting in place a firm-wide risk assessment. That's looking at your firm as a whole, looking at your client base, looking at where those clients are located, looking at the services you provide, and trying to get a sense as to, well, what's your risk exposure, and then of course putting in procedures and responses to address those risks. And also policies and procedures in terms of how you approach AML compliance within the firm, and how you undertake CDD, and so forth. But then the third pillar really to ensuring compliance is that training aspect, and so that's where our focus lies now. And so I want to first consider, well, what should your training be covering? Because when you look at the CCAB guidance, now for those of you not familiar, so the Consultative Committee of Accountancy Bodies produce, of course, comprehensive guidance on money laundering compliance. And so CCAB guidance breaks down what training should be addressing. And so just having a look at my slide, your training should provide, well, an explanation of the legal requirements, great, a requirement to conduct client due diligence, and of course ongoing monitoring, when to make an internal report, relevant data protection requirements, and then awareness of red flags, and lastly, how to deal with situations that might be related to money laundering and terrorist financing. And so this covers kind of circumstances such as issues around confidentiality, tipping off, these kind of areas. Now, the reason I've highlighted those last two in red is because I feel that for most firms, and particularly with, I think, with a large proportion of staff, I think it's those areas in particular where there are weaknesses. And I think that's why I think firms are perhaps sometimes not fulfilling their obligations, and likewise, of course, the obligations on individuals to also to report as well. So that's what I want to pick up on. Now, how do firms currently approach AML training? And I think that when you look at, and I'm sure when you reflect on the training you've received to date and what that looks like, I think for most firms, it's a case of sending an email around and instructing staff to book onto a particular training provider's annual AML update webinar. And then once that's been viewed, to confirm that it's been viewed, yep, certificate obtained, great, job done. The problem I think with this type of approach is that I put the emphasis on update webinars, because AML update webinars are, of course, absolutely essential because someone in the firm needs to be aware of where there are changes to the regulations, how that impacts the firm, and what steps they need to take to update their own procedures. And also, of course, within the larger staff as a whole, building knowledge. I think that external training, update webinars very much have their place as part of the overall training. And again, reflecting on my previous slide, looking at what training should be covering, that's addressing a number of those areas. The downside, of course, to this type of training is that I don't think it's always as practical as it perhaps could be. It's certainly not tailored to your specific needs. And of course, just by the very nature of that type of training, it's very difficult to, of course, address everyone's needs and answer everyone's questions. So I think that's the issue, and I think to complement external training, I think firms do need to actually start looking more at putting in place internal training sessions. So what those sessions should look like, I think that they should be regular sessions. Biannual, I think, would be sufficient. I don't think it perhaps needs to be any more regular than that. I think that looking at all personnel should be included. That's key. Anyone that is client-facing or has contact with clients, so that includes staff on the front desk, and would also include subcontractors as well. And you'll find that AML regulations require firms to ensure that everyone does receive appropriate training, including subcontractors. And it should be in small groups. So think about your teams and think about the different issues they face. The audit team, the accounts team, payroll department, different teams will face different types of AML kind of potential risks and issues. And I think that by addressing training within the relevant departments, you can be more specific to the issues of greatest relevance. Practical red flag training, so case studies based around issues that should be alerting staff to potential reporting matters. Discursive sessions, I think, are absolutely fundamental. I think that simply sitting on a webinar and being quite passive is never going to, I think, really have the effect that is sometimes required to raise awareness. I think that by having more discursive sessions where you're putting the onus on people in the room to actually think and to respond, I think they're more likely to take away from that session, I think, more of the contents. You can also ensure that those sessions incorporate your policies and procedures in terms of exactly how things would work within your firm. So, for example, where would they find a suspicious activity report? What format does that report need to be completed in? How is it sent, etc.? And lastly, feedback from the annual compliance reviews. Your firms should be undertaking annual compliance reviews. That's something you can do yourselves in-house, or at least the money laundering reporting officer can undertake in themselves, or external training providers can also undertake that type of compliance service. But either way, the feedback from those reviews, I think, having that type of internal session where you're discussing some of the weaknesses, I think is quite important. So let's get perhaps more into the specifics of how these sessions might look. And that's really what I want to kind of try to now draw your attention to, because it's all well and good talking about, this in terms of how these sessions should perhaps look in broader terms, but more specifically, I think the sessions should be looking at very specific scenarios. What you'll find is in the booklets that you've got, I've got 3 scenarios to run through. I think the first 2 are in the booklet, so please feel free to have a look. Let's have a look at the first one together. I've used this as an example because this is a very common scenario that you'll find if you're working in accounts, audits, this type of issue, where as part of a recent assignment, you've noticed that the client is retaining duplicate payments from its customers and has made no attempt to notify or repay these amounts. Now, I see this very often when reviewing audit files where there's been some kind of overpayments. I see it a lot with care homes. I see it a lot with companies that work with kind of local government where they've received overpayments and not much has been done about it. It's kind of sat there on the balance sheet, sat there as a creditor, but there doesn't seem to be too much kind of perhaps attempts to repay the funds. And in some cases, we're talking some quite material sums of money that have been received. So, well, is this a reportable matter? Now, in the booklets in front of you, I've kind of broken this down into the various components in terms of what staff should be considering. Is it criminal conduct? Well, again, potentially yes, if there's no intention in terms of depriving someone as proceeds of crime act. Is it deliberate? Again, it's a judgment call as to whether it's deliberate. You would have to assess the amount of time that's elapsed and the amounts involved. Is there criminal property? Well, yes, the overpayment. Is it privileged circumstances? No, you've been carrying out regulated services, accounts preparation, audit work. You found it in the course of your work. It's a discovery, so no, it's not privileged circumstances. Is it overseas conduct exemption? Well, absolutely not in this case. So in this instance, I think subject to some kind of broader consideration, you'd be looking at potentially a reportable matter. But as you can see, that type of kind of process can be very discursive. And of course, when you start getting into, I think, within a room with a team, that really kind of, it's relatable, and I think that people will start to think about the issue a lot more as a result. Example 2, again in the booklets, but just to kind of illustrate what I mean. As part of finalising your client's tax return, your client mentions, so they're a Polish national, perhaps based here in the UK, but in passing, they've, say, evading tax in Poland. They've not submitted a tax return, perhaps you could say. They're fully compliant here in the UK, so they're perhaps some income from payroll. Then, of course, perhaps some self-employed income, hence why they're completing a tax return. So fully compliant here, but they mention in passing that they should be doing a tax return in Poland, and so again, that raises a number of questions. Well, is it criminal conduct? Yes, it is. Is it deliberate? Well, yes, from the information. Criminal property? Potentially, yes. Is it privileged circumstances? No. It's a comment in passing rather than a confidential discussion. Is there an overseas conduct exemption? Well, although the offence is taking place overseas, you must assume that it's illegal to evade tax in Poland. So no, it's not an overseas conduct exemption. So again, that would technically be reportable. Now, of course, I've kind of gone through those points in perhaps a little haste, but you get the idea that some of those discussion points, particularly around privileged circumstance, around overseas conduct exemption, that's something which I think staff are generally not too comfortable with or aware of those requirements. The third example is not in the booklet, but again, it's just to try to illustrate how you can run these sessions with the right type of material. Again, I've tried to choose something that's relatable. So I've picked, after a hard week in the office, Jane was out at the weekend and noticed someone pull into the local petrol station, not a client, fill up, and then drive off. She made a note of the license plate. Is this a reportable matter? And I'll just bring the answer up, but do not report because it's not part of regulated work. So it's not someone, any connection with your business activities, it would not be reportable. Again, this is something which causes some staff some kind of hesitation. Now you can vary the scenario. Now you'll see just on my slide, I've underlined not a client, but what if they were a client? Again, it's a good question to pose. So if they were a client, well then, again, you can talk about that as a discussion point, but then you should be coming down to, well, actually, technically, it would be a reportable matter. Certainly, you'd be going above and beyond the call of duty to some extent, but technically reportable. And lastly, again, you can vary that yet further. What if Jane didn't make a note of the license plate? So it was a client, they drove off without paying, didn't get the license plate. Is that reportable? And the answer to that is no. No knowledge of proceeds or the perpetrator per se. So you would not technically report. But again, I don't want to get too kind of fixated on the example, but what I'm trying to illustrate is the discursive nature of relatable scenarios that will capture staff's awareness and understanding. So in terms of these internal sessions, if you're going to run these sessions, start with concise practical situations like the ones I've just kind of been through. So something which is very kind of punchy, very relatable. Then, of course, over time, you can perhaps scenarios. You can bring in pre-session material if you want to look at more complex scenarios. You can ask staff to present on specific themes. So, for example, what is suspicion? I think that's a very good question because that raises a whole load of perhaps misconceptions around the money laundering regime in terms of what is the threshold to become suspicious. You can look at the availability of resources together. The professional bodies, ACCA, ICAW, produce a wealth of material. So there's a lot there which your firm should be making use of. And if you really want to kind of, over time, develop, perhaps introduce short assessments so you can evidence the effectiveness of training as well. Final thoughts from myself. Obstacles, prioritizing and the availability of suitable material. These sessions will very much hinge upon having good material, so that I think is quite key. Keep the sessions short and punchy, 1 hour, an hour and a half max, but somewhere in that region, so don't aim to cover too much. Select case studies that are engaging and relatable, as I've perhaps already mentioned. Again, and that can be specific to departments within the firm. Encourage discussion through suitable seating, so perhaps having more of a kind of a circular seating format, and again, so that it's discursive rather than a kind of just a lecture room, kind of classroom type room setting. Keep everyone engaged, and where possible, don't allow perhaps just a few individuals to dominate discussions. Certainly when I'm lecturing, or in the past when I used to do kind of more student type lecturing, I'm very keen to involve everyone in the room so that people weren't just passive. So do try to kind of throw questions to those attending. And of course, if you're going to run these type of sessions, of course, if people are giving up their lunch breaks and so forth, do provide refreshments so that these sessions are as pleasant and as comfortable as possible. But that's all from myself. So thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, yeah, happy to answer.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Phil. I really appreciate that. And that was, quite comprehensive in understanding, how to actually implement education in your firm and some AML principles also. I just wanted to mention something I said when we were looking at the AML education landscape in the UK and seeing what 2020 was doing. We were like, they're doing stuff. They're a really great resource for the things around AML and other accounting knowledge points that you need. Very bad English, I apologize. How can people reach you? Tell us a little bit more about 2020 and what you have to offer there.
I mean, certainly just on the website provides a full kind of coverage of all the services and training provided. As I said, I mean, broadly it's split between CPD training and then compliance services, which is more where perhaps my background and involvement comes from.
And people can see you in person at FAB, is that right? Or is that the first event that you guys are going to?
We will be attending, but not myself. I'm at the 2020 annual conference tomorrow in London, but no, I think my colleagues will be attending. So at FAB.
No, that's fantastic. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. We had some AML specific questions come through the chat that Calathea have gone to answer. If there's anything education specific, feel free to pop them in the chat and we can answer them post this talk. But that's fantastic. I'll leave you to your day. So you said you're at the ICAEW today, is that right? In London?
Yes, that's right. Yep. Yep. I shall. Yep. Be here for the rest of the day. So great. Well, it's been a pleasure joining today. So
Thank you.
Wish everyone the best for the rest of the sessions.
Yes, perfect. And I appreciate how you said that AML education just needs to be a few hours, 1 or 2 hours, just keep it short and engaging. That's definitely what we've tried to do with the summit. So there's only so much content you can talk about AML. So that's fantastic. Awesome. We'll have you move off the stage if Sophie could do that. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so this is your T&T time, your tea and toilet time. Just a wee bit of a break for you guys just to make some notes in your workbooks of some of the elements that you want to implement in education for your firm. Make a cup of tea. I learned what a tea cake is yesterday. We call it a malo puff in New Zealand. But for those that don't need a comfort break, T&T, that's maybe my word. For those that are still here, we deliberated on how we were going to fill the 5 minutes. Thank you, Debbie. I said I wanted a DJ set for 5 minutes for you guys. So I was told that was silly. No one thought I was being serious, but I was serious. But what we're going to do instead, when we were at Accountex North in September for the launch of Firmcheck, I talked to an accountant and I said, I really want to try and make AML fun. And he laughed in my face. So to that man, I am now going to do a 5-minute stand-up comedy skit on AML that I pulled off ChatGPT last night. You don't have to stay, but do keep your window open just so you don't lose your tab. And you can just keep it running. After this, we have a fireside chat with Jonathan from Raedan. Kev will be back for that also. But enjoy my stand-up comedy from ChatGPT. Definitely how ChatGPT was built to be used. So silly. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Lovely to see so many bright faces, brighter than the future of anyone trying to launder money in the UK, am I right? Oh, don't worry, I'm not here to order anyone, or am I? No, I'm not. Or maybe. Anyway, let's talk about something we all find absolutely hilarious, AML compliance in the UK. Yeah, I know, it's the comedy gold you've all been waiting for. So AML compliance, or as I like to call it, the world's most elaborate game of hide and seek, except instead of hiding behind curtains, you're trying to hide a mountain of cash. And the seeker is the entire UK government armed with a magnifying glass and a very serious frown. Now, for those of you thinking AML stands for another mundane lecture, you're not entirely wrong, but actually, it's all about stopping money laundering. You know, the process where criminals try to make dirty money look squeaky clean. And let me tell you, the UK takes this very seriously. They have rules, regulations, and my favorite, the compliance checklist that's longer than my last relationship, and that was unnecessarily complicated. So silly. Dealing with AML compliance is like being in a relationship where you're constantly proving you're not cheating. No, babe, I swear I didn't hide any assets offshore, those Seychelles company documents, purely for a geography project. And have you ever tried reading through AML regulations? It's like they're trying to protect money from being laundered by boring it to death. I mean, if you managed to stay awake through the whole thing, congratulations, you are now legally a bank. And here's another AML basics joke for you. You know how they say stick to the basics and you'll be fine? Well, in AML compliance, sticking to the basics means you'll be fined heavily because you've missed that one suspicious 20 quid deposit that was actually a drug lord's lunch money. Let's talk about customer due diligence. It's like going on a first date, but instead of asking, what's your sign? You're like, can I ask your utility bills for the last 3 months? And can you explain these large transactions? No, seriously, I'm asking for a friend called the Financial Conduct Authority. Submitting a suspicious activity report is the financial world's version of tattling. It's like saying, I'm not saying they're laundering money, but they did buy a gold-plated yacht in cash and named it dirty money. Just putting it out there. So let's talk about the consequences of not following AML rules, because you know in the UK, they don't just give you a slap on the wrist and say, naughty, naughty. No, they go full Game of Thrones on you. It's like you failed to report a suspicious transaction to the Tower of London with you. You'll get a fine so big it makes your bank account look like it's been on a weight loss program. Oh, you had millions in there? Not anymore, you don't. It's like the government's way of laundering money back from you. International money laundering schemes are like these complex heist movies, except in the end, everyone gets caught because someone accidentally CC'd the FCA in an email. Oops, was that not BCC? My bad. Oh, and the training sessions. They're supposed to make you an AML ninja. Halfway through, I'm ready to spot suspicious financial activity in my sleep. My friend once asked me for 20 quid for a lunch, and I was like, seems like a laundering scheme. I'm going to need to see some ID and a detailed business plan for that sandwich. And let's not forget the reputational damage. It's like showing up to a high society ball wearing nothing but a I forgot my AML check sign. Suddenly, you're not invited to the cool finance parties anymore. Your only friends are the pigeons in the park, and even they're like, sorry, we don't associate with non-compliers. In conclusion, AML compliance in the UK is like that one friend who insists on organising fun events but ends up planning a tax seminar. You know it's for your own good, but you can't help wishing it was a little more fun. So next time you're filling out an AML form, remember somewhere out there's a comedian trying to make it funny and failing. Just keep the banks trying to follow those regulations to a T. Thank you. And remember, keep your money clean, but your jokes dirty. Good night. You're welcome for that. I am going to invite Kev on the stage. He can give me feedback on how that went down. Love the support. Thank you for everyone in the chat. ChatGPT is a very powerful tool. I encourage you all to use it, maybe for some more serious means. What did you think, Kev?
Not going to lie, when I started off, I was like, is she really going to do this? And to be fair, I found myself laughing quite a bit there. I think if anyone was on yesterday, you would have heard Sophie being really honest and not giving herself credit that she hasn't done public speaking and she was very nervous, yet comes and stands up and just does 5 minutes of AML jokes. So but I was genuinely giggling at quite a lot of that.
Oh, good. Look, if it's not fun, I don't want to do it, honestly. Okay, cool. So I will now leave. I will just take a minute to calm down after that. It was a bit hard just to do it to a room full of no one. And I will leave you to do the fireside chat with Jonathan from Raedan, if we can invite him to the stage. And thank you. AML definitely needs to be more fun. It is serious. You can get serious fines, but if you can have a giggle along the way, it benefits everyone. It doesn't have to be that serious. Hi, Jonathan. Thanks for the light in the background for the fireside chat. Very ambiance, but I will leave you guys to it.
Thanks, Sophie.
So good morning. So follow that, Jonathan.
Yeah, I know that's awful. That's horrible to put that just before our session. I think I'd actually quite like a recording of that to show all the team, because I think it's probably a great way to introduce AML training sessions.
I think the one that got me was going on a date and asking someone for their utility bill.
Yeah.
Just
before you pay for dinner.
Probably better than my usual chat, to be fair. So yeah. So thanks very much for joining us. I have spoken to Jonathan before. Jonathan's a Firmcheck user, but I've been a follower of Jonathan on social media for a long time and aware of his firm. But for those that haven't, Jonathan, do you want to give us a little rundown about yourself, your practice, and really how it all got started?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been working for 18 years within accounting within creative industries. So kind of the firm I trained at. And even before that, my dad ran an accountancy firm kind of through the 80s and 90s, and that was all within kind of theatre and music and things. So it's kind of been in my blood in a way for a long time. But we started Raedan 13 years ago, wanted to stick with that niche, but also really wanted to bring in technology. So when we did start 13 years ago, we started on zero, day one. And it's always been about trying to bring in the right solutions to make sure that we're kind of creating efficiencies to give more time for conversations. And I guess in a way that's kind of a good segue into how we kind of see education working as well, both kind of within our team, but also with our clients, in that one of our kind of key mantras is that we're here not just to advise, but to educate. For me, I'm that guy, when you have someone like a plumber comes around to fix the boiler, I'm sat there over his shoulder. It's like, oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? Where does that go? Like, why would that happen? And it's not in any way because I want to do his job. I want to leave the experts to it. But I just have this real interest in how stuff works. And for me, that creates the value, the understanding. And that's kind of what I want to share, as I say, kind of with a team and with clients, is I think education enhances the value of the things you're doing. Understanding it, rather than it being kind of someone else's problem, someone else's dark art, I think makes it more interesting.
I couldn't agree more, and I think Billy Connolly talks about that as well. I think if someone comes around to paint his house, he's just sitting staring at the guy painting it. It's almost that respect as well, isn't it? Yeah. It's just like, hey, you're doing something and you're doing it bloody well. I see value in what you're doing and want to learn. And we'll just dig right in. Obviously, it's you started off zero technology and things like that. So how do you manage that education internally? Is that something that you look for when you recruit staff, or is it is it a key part of the character of the people that you're looking for, or is that did you inherit staff and have to take them on that journey? So how do you kind of manage that education internally?
Yeah, I guess our core values, I suppose, partly derive from me as the business owner, and two of them are curiosity and inspire change. And it is this idea that we should always be asking questions, trying not to make assumptions. And I think that always drives education, if you're asking questions and learning all the time. And that inspire the change idea is the kind of the walk. So are we doing the things we're talking about, and kind of very much seeking to, when we hire, thinking about how those potential recruits are falling into those values. And in fact, we changed a couple of years ago. One of the first parts of our kind of recruitment program now is that the kind of applicant has to send a video, a 2-minute video just talking about themselves. And not everyone finds video easy. And we're not obviously looking for high quality edits and all that kind of stuff. But I think you get a really quick insight in that 2-minute chat as to whether people really do fall into those values and kind of whether actually they will be good educators, as I say, because that's a key thing for us, is that we want our team to be happy explaining to clients what's going on, not just here's your tax return, go away. But being able to explain. We use LIM videos loads with clients. That's one thing, kind of getting away from AML, but that explanation and doing it by video works really well. It's been a real strong point for us. And so in that, getting the videos in, you get to see how they might work in that way. And therefore, I think it just does help to see kind of how people would then share their knowledge as a team as well, making sure people are always interacting and sharing what they know and what they learn.
Yeah, I agree. I think when I've been through any recruitment round, asking them for a video usually reduces the number of applicants quite quickly. But then also, I love getting the questions of, hey, how do you want this video? And I was like, no, it's your problem to find, and and you start digging out. I think Debbie's put a little comment on the chat here, is reading online is hell, well done. And I think she's relating to the Sophie's Billy Connolly routine. But actually, reading anything online can be quite laborious and time consuming. So getting the team used to delivering videos and discussing stuff. I dare say that we all learned a little bit more about AML there through the jokes, but having the ability to talk about it rather than just read must be really helpful internally. So again, in terms of training internally, do you encourage all the staff to participate in facilitating training?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's again, coming back to the education idea, it's important that everyone understands it. And I think one of the things that I was wary of is that you have like an officer who is kind of responsible for it, but it's the team who are in the coalface. They're the ones who are seeing things go on day to day, and so everybody throughout the business has got to really understand what they're looking out for. I think the examples are the really powerful thing. It's you can read all the legislation and listen to kind of various kind of webinars and things, but it's those examples, like the simple ones that Phil just brought up. Most people will have come across one of those examples, if not all of them. And that's where it hits home and makes you start thinking, oh, okay, yeah, a client's been overpaid. Oh, that's annoying. Oh, hang on, they're not doing anything about it. It is those triggers of everyone in the team needs to be able to spot those, and then just having the ability to discuss. So I think the other thing that Phil said, and I think you said it this morning as well in your kind of intro, is this discursive side of education for me is really, really important. Not all education has to be formal and for the purpose of CPD. It can't be tick boxy. And like, if I go right back to my training as kind of ICAW, I won't say which body it was with, but I kind of came out of my training feeling like the ethics bit and the AML bit was oh yeah, we've got to do this as well. Let's shove all the students in a room and we'll give them an hour of ethics or AML education, and then we've done our job. And if you're treating it that way with students from the get-go, of course people are going to come through going, it's AML. Do I have to do something? Oh, I think I do. There was some stuff in my training at one point about, I can't remember, ticking some boxes. I'm sure we're okay. It's got to be more interesting. It's got to be funny. Like what Sophie did, I think for me was brilliant. That's exactly kind of how you should start a session. Get people laughing, get people interested, chuck some examples out so that people can see how AML really impacts life. And from there, you can have good conversations and move things forward, and you're much more likely to spot things and do the things you need to do.
Yeah, my experience of that is, I done engineering at university because I was good at maths, and my maths lecturer was a Russian guy, and he spoke like a traditional Russian James Bond villain, and he loved maths, but his delivery was just deadpan. English wasn't his first language, and I was dreading going on to the rigs to implement what he taught me. Within 30 seconds, I met with a Geordie guy that taught me something completely different in a funny way. And do you know what? I remember the 30 seconds with the Geordie guy rather than the 2 years with the lecturer. So it is there. AML specifically in the firm, how do you manage that? And is there any things that you've perhaps changed throughout the years? You say it's been sort of 13, 14 years in practice. How have you seen the how you manage that internally change over the last sort of decade or so?
Yeah, I think, when we did start, it was obviously when you're kind of a sole trader or just one or two people, you do approach things differently. Maybe when you get to a point of having a team, we're a team of 10 now, so we're still fairly small, but it does make discussion easier, more interesting. And so that's come into it a lot more. We have a lot of regular kind of training sessions, team meetings and things, and we try to make sure those things come in. I think you mentioned about onboarding, AML is a very important part of the onboarding, and we always share the onboarding journey with the whole team. So when a new client comes on board, we're sharing that with everyone. And so they understand the stages that are going kind of along and where they're at and how things are working. So they see the reality of where those things kind of impact as well. But yeah, I think AML is hugely important. If I'm kind of brutally honest, we didn't do it anywhere near enough 10 years ago. We were tick boxy. We signed up for a product and said, great, done our job. But yeah, we've learned as we've gone forward. I think in a way, we've been a little bit lucky that a lot of our clients are fairly low risk, but equally one of the kind of most interesting things we did as a team last year was we sat down to have a discussion about it. Actually, when we were thinking about migrating over to Firmcheck, it's like, what do we need? What are the problems we need to solve? And there was this comment of actually a lot of our clients are low risk, like, how much do we need? And it was in that discussion where we started talking about some of the specifics, like, well, actually, that client's not that low risk, or this one isn't either. And actually, we probably need to think about this. And then we reflect and said, okay, for the ones that are genuinely low risk, of which maybe there were fewer than we thought, what do we need to do? Like, what do we need to look out for? And it was in that kind of team discussion where we kind of really honed in on AML, but also the risk assessment part, which is where we were really pleased. Obviously, Firmcheck ticks both those boxes, not wanting to tick boxes, but it does both of those things for us, supports us in both those areas. And that was all through discussion. And for me, it is that, I think you mentioned before in the warm-up, before the kind of testing about kids. I always feel like since I became a parent, I've learned an awful lot about how I interact with adults as well. And the kind of non-assumption, the way you educate, it doesn't all have to be sat in a classroom. Like some of the best education I think I've delivered to my children is the ones where you're out and about in the real world. You're talking about real things going on and you're sharing stories and that kind of stuff. And it's also much more interesting for the person receiving the information. And so that, for me, kind of going back to almost where I started, it's that informal training that for me is probably more important than the formal. It's the conversation, the chats, the examples that we can all share with each other.
Yeah, spot on. And I kind of said this yesterday to Glenn from the ACCA, is that AML in general is seen as this big burden sort of on practices, on accountants in general, and I completely understand why that is. But is it just because it's labelled AML? And is it just because you give it a label on it that it has to be this big formal, big meaty task that's done and a big deal? Or actually, could you just call it understanding your client or constant review of your client's behaviors or whatever that is? Because actually you do AML every day, probably subconsciously, and it's a little bit like training. Yeah. Oh, I've got training today and that's 2 days out the office and it's a bit of a skive or whatever, but actually storytelling, team meetings, sharing good practices, that's training. And actually just getting into a culture of doing that internally, documenting it, proving it to the regulators that come in. Hey, here's our minutes from our team meeting or whatever that is. That actually it's just a continuous mindset. And one of the things that I wrote down is your 2 values. Curiosity and inspiring change. It's having that culture internally that this is all a continuous review, continuous learning journey that we're kind of all on internally and with our clients.
Yeah, I think the other thing we try to do as well is that we've been sharing, I said that the Educate to Advise works with clients as well, and we have been kind of talking to our clients about why we do AML. So I think sometimes, you get that kind of, oh, can you please prove you exist kind of email, and you've got to go away and do it. And I think we're all kind of used to it. We've done it for various things, and so it feels quite natural, and we maybe don't ask too many questions about it, but we wanted to make sure we were explaining to our clients why we're asking for this, why it's important. And it's not about we're trying to prove you're a criminal. It's about trying to help protect you and make sure your business is secure. And it's that kind of side of it. and this is why we're asking.
And what was your, because this came up quite a lot yesterday, you know, like, should we tell our client, is that tipping them off, is that doing that? What was your I think the opposite. I think if someone told me that's what they're doing, I think, Christ, Jonathan's thorough, you know, he's going to look after me here. But in general, you know, what's your client's reaction to that? Because, you know, sometimes you especially when you deal with sort of larger firms, you know, oh, I need all your guys' passports, and the directors are difficult and they don't do it. But in general, your clients usually pretty receptive to that.
Yeah, I think partly because I guess we are all used to being asked more than we ever have been. So I think most are okay with it. I think it was just because a couple of times we had some feedback of that kind of, well, why do you need it? Why do you want it? So we thought we'd try and proactively get ahead of it for everyone and make sure it was really clear why we were asking for it. And it's not tipping off, because at that point, nothing's happened. There is no issue, but it's just about making the client aware. We do it a lot. We do, even when we ask for a copy of a bank statement, we tell clients why we're asking for it.
Yeah.
Because we want them to understand the value of this annoying request that's coming from their bookkeeper. Like, why are you asking for me? Zero's got it. No, well, no, this is the reason. And I think that's the thing that we all need to make sure we kind of buy time to do, is have these conversations, explain things to clients, and then they perceive the value more highly. But yeah, it's that education bit for me.
It's a bit like I've got 2 toddlers, so it's exactly. As adults, we tend to think that we don't want to dumb it down to another adult. You know, hey, can you give me your bank statement? The pain point of going backward and forward of why and urgency of that. If you said, hey, I need the bank statement for XYZ, you probably would have got it straight away. Yeah. So it's our sort of probably internal monologues thinking, Jonathan's all right, he'll send me that. And actually, dare I say, we all need to treat each other like kids.
Yeah. No, I'll be completely honest. Some of the inspiration for the kind of proactive education is to reduce the number of emails we get. It's by getting ahead of. It's almost like surfacing an FAQ every time to try and stop the, why do you want the bank statement? Do you not already have it? Isn't it in Zero? Don't you have a bank feed? It's like, well, okay, if we can just tell them. And we'll be doing the same with AML, and then hopefully it does reduce the number of, why do you need my passport kind of thing.
There was a question just came in from Debbie there, and I think it's in relation just to a little quote that you had. I think you said that when you speak to the client about AML, you're saying that actually you're doing AML to protect them, and we hear that quite a lot. But in your experience, how does it protect the client? And you know, aren't you protecting your own business? It's up to the client to protect themselves, but how does it protect the client asking for this?
Yeah, I guess my technical knowledge of AML may let me down in some of this, but for me, it's our job as accountants, for me, is about being able to reassure the clients we work with. That's what we sell, is reassurance. And so the first step is reassuring the client that they are compliant. You know, you're doing the compliance for your perspective, but you're also kind of demonstrating that they are compliant and that they are in a good position. Also, not all the businesses we work with are one-person owner structures. There are other people, and we all assume if we work with other people that we know them, we know what's going on, and everything's great, and we're all best friends and completely open and honest. But I have witnessed in my life where there has been a director or a partner in a firm who is not being completely honest. And you know, if you are helping to spot and identify those risks or problems if they already exist, then you're protecting the client, you're helping them, you're making sure that they understand and know where there's an issue that they need to look at.
Yeah, Glenn from ACC gave that example yesterday. You know, he had a client of an accountant who had a client of 20, 25 years. He met them regularly, but there was a silent shareholder there, and actually it was a silent shareholder that caused chaos and actually caused the accountancy practice to close down because they weren't doing the relevant checks and fines and closed the accountancy business. So it is, you know, you might know your clients, but you know, or you might know them individually and personally. That's great, but it's that protection of you're not suspicious about them, but there could be someone else, and actually that's how fraudsters and that's how anti-money laundering works. It's people trying to go under the radar and take advantage of those relationships. Totally. So totally agree. I kind of just want to end and pick your brain. You're always got your finger on the pulse of what's coming up next and what's exciting you and you know, so good. I know you went skiing with some like-minded accountants like you and some vendors. I'm always jealous of that one. I've not been skiing for years. So, you know, coming up down the tracks, you know, is exciting time to be an accountant, and how do you sort of share that with your staff again and get them enthused? And, you know, some of the stats that I mentioned earlier about the capacity crisis and why people leave the industry is like that lack of sort of excitement and pathway. So how do you take all this knowledge that you're getting and all the exposure that you go through to the rest of the staff? And is there anything in particular that you're looking forward to coming down the tracks?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously we've got, starting with Firmcheck now, we've got some amazing events over the next few months, and for me it's encouraging team to go to those and getting team kind of into Accountex and Xerocons and all the other events, and making sure there's kind of the opportunity for them to go and experience. I think for me, Xerocon was always the big one, where you go and you learn so much, not just about the industry, but also kind of other things that affect us more widely, and you kind of great speakers, real good energy. And I think it's seeing that which does help. I'll be honest, you know, we had an ACA trainee who qualified and left us the day after and went in like outside of industry. It happens, and we try our best. But I think as an industry, we've got to stand up and shout a bit more about the value we deliver, and also show the kind of the amazing stuff we do. I always talk about kind of how we truly help clients, this reassurance piece, and kind of give the examples. I remember one of our clients came to me and said, you know, I want to propose to my girlfriend. Do I have enough money to be able to take it out of the business? How can I do? Like, I had a client who called me to tell me she was pregnant before she called her mother, just to reassure I wasn't involved in that in any way. But, you know, it was this, she wanted to check financially she was going to be okay, because she was a bit worried about how this conversation was going to go, because she'd not long started up a business. We are there to help clients, and we've got to show accountants coming through that it isn't all tax returns and that kind of thing. It is about the impact we have on real lives, how we can impact business owners. They run their business to get the life they want. We can have a really positive impact on that. And that is what our industry needs to do. It needs to jump up and shout out about it a whole lot more than it does. And we need to turn the tide. We need to attract people from marketing, from customer service, people who have amazing people skills, who can educate, who can share knowledge and can understand how businesses run, and then they can bring in the accounting skills. I think we need to start showing that we can bring people in from other industries and nab their talent.
I couldn't agree more. And again, I've already mentioned my sort of brief foray into engineering, and the reason I've done, my teacher kind of said, you're good at maths, you'll go and do that. And I look at accounting industry at the minute, and yeah, okay, you need an element in mathematics and stuff like that, but there's not many industries in the world where you have to be an expert in so many different fields, whether that be the AML, the accounting job itself, being able to talk to people, but you have to be an expert in a florist, creative industries, you know, all that thing and all that stories and all that storytelling that you're doing. It's just if I had my time again, I would do accounting training. I think it's just like, what a fascinating and different sort of varied job. But I think you're sort of wired a little bit different. You know, if I can be there and you take a lot of accountability there. What about the accounting bodies and all of this? Do you think they do enough? And I don't want to point fingers, but do you think they do enough to sell accounting? And then again, I've seen some of the comments on here that, especially with AML, a lot of the attitude towards AML is about the anxiety and the stick element from the accounting bodies. And I did write down carrot and stick earlier when you were talking about staff. Is there too much of the stick element in the industry of like, you've got to do this is the rules, or you get fined or stuff, or actually, hey, if you do AML, you might know more about your client, you might offer better services, that kind of thing. So, you know, you sounded quite good there, and you say we need to take responsibility, but reality is there's other people that could do more, and their attitude towards this is usually the stick sort of method first, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I guess it's a fine line to tread, isn't it? There's a serious element to what we do. And you kind of, from rule following, we've got to be able to do that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a human thing. The vast majority of businesses in the UK are small businesses. It's one person or a couple or, a few friends running something, trying to do something great or something different or something they just love. There has to be a way that we can guide them through without the stick. There's got to be a way that we can keep them compliant, make sure that nothing awful is going on, but there's still got to be room that, someone who has never done any accounting, might not know anything about running a business, can have a passion and run a business and be successful. And we can be there to reassure them. And it'd be flexible enough that it isn't all fear and stick and everything. So there's got to be a balance in it for me, in that we need, I think, the governing bodies to be flexible enough to understand that all businesses are different. And there's obviously a massive difference between big corporate and small business and what can be achieved. And then there needs to be some flex there, but there needs to be this human understanding that it's people that run businesses. People make mistakes, but they're not all out there to defraud people or money launder. There's got to be a little bit of give and take, and understanding that ultimately, I think, this is definitely a learning from having children. Everyone just tries in that particular moment to do their best. We don't wake up going out there to try and cause trouble. We all wake up, we all want to do our best and with whatever skills and tools we've got. So I think the rules have to somehow, and the bodies have to somehow kind of make sure that's built into what they're doing and how they're driving things forward.
I couldn't agree more. And probably final question for me, and again, I'm just taking them from the comments here. And again, just the first emotion that I usually hear is people guilt or fear about AML, and it's the mental sort of health aspect. It's actually not that. So again, is it, as someone that's in my mind a forward-thinking practice, is the mental health aspect, the sort of work-life balance, something that you guys focus on in terms of a practice, and do you offer help and support when it comes to that? Because I see that almost daily when I speak to an accountant, that stress, stroke, anxiety is a huge one, especially around AML, but that sort of fear and guilt, it's, how I'm sure you felt that as an accountant before. So how have you dealt with that? And have you got any advice in that? And now that Sophie's joined us, definitely last question.
Yeah, going to get kicked out, aren't we? I think, there is definitely stress in what we do, because you're taking on responsibility on behalf of others, and that is always stressful. And you're trying to make sure you do all the right things. And the reality is there's a lot of things chucked at us that we have to get right. And then you've got to be human, and then you've got to actually do the tax turn, and you've got to be approachable and available. And it's not an easy world to operate in. I like the excitement and the variety that comes with it. But I think in terms of the anxiety bit, I think in the same way as any other kind of mental health wellness issue, is talking about things that makes it better. And I think, what you're doing over these 3 days is amazing, because I don't really think anything like it's been done before. AML is the tick box in the back of the room that we've all ticked and forgotten about. And in previously, a lot of software providers, won't mention names, here's our solution. If you do this, you're compliant. Everything's done. Great job. It's not. And it's got to be about talking about it amongst our teams, with clients, with you guys, whoever it is. Conversation is the thing that hopefully will take away the anxiety. Building it into being part of everything takes away the stress. So I think, as I say, we have a regular cadence of team training sessions, team meetings. AML comes up all the time in little snippets. It's that informal bit that I think does take away the anxiety and the stress. And for me, the anxiety reduction comes from the fact that I can lean all the team, because I feel like they are looking at it as much as I am. So it doesn't feel like, oh God, I've got to get this all right, and if I miss it, the whole world's going to end, because I've got a team of people who are looking at it too. I will stop there.
No, fantastic. 1 hour, 36 minutes for the guys that are editing this. Clip that. What you guys are doing is superb, and that's our social media strategy for the next year. So thank you very much. Just before I drop off, where people follow you on LinkedIn, I recommend following Jonathan massively. You'll get lots of good insights about his practice, his day-to-day life, his attitude to accounting. So LinkedIn, Anybody else? You usually have some speaking events coming up as well. Are you a guest speaker? Anybody else?
I'm not at the moment. No, I've been trying to avoid it for the last year or so, having done kind of lots of panels. I love doing panels, but I just decided to take a little break. So what I noticed doing panels was you go to the events and you miss it all. So I'm not doing too many at the moment, but yeah, LinkedIn in particular, if you like really bad jokes, make sure you're on LinkedIn on a Friday. I do a regular terrible joke that you can all come and groan at.
Oh, what a segue. Speaking of bad jokes, our comedian is back. So.
I'm right here. I actually jumped in because I had a quick question. But I just wanted to know, listening to the session, I love how it evolved into talking about the industry bodies needing to do more to help, mental health, all of those elements. We didn't choose to cover with this AML Summit, but the fact that they're brought up means that they're very important. And we do hear that as Firmcheck, is that I'm awake at night, I'm stressed. And you hear some of the fines that people get. Of course, like that's enough to sink your business. And the responsibility of that is huge. So I've made note of that to kind of see where we have space to make those conversations in future. But I wanted to ask you, Jonathan, these fireside chats and the accounting firms and the people that are coming on for them, they're all very determined, tech focused with it, modern, challenging the status quo, all of these awesome words. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I wanted to hear what your kind of mindset is day to day to be able to have those things be said about you, I suppose. So how do you make those changes in your business? Because I can imagine some people watching would feel like it's quite a difficult jump from A to B, maybe from a more traditional way of being an accountant on paper or an Excel spreadsheet, which is fine. But what's that mindset to get to being more modern and challenging the status quo?
Yeah, I think for me, it was always built in. I remember my dad was quite tech focused. And I remember once he brought a phone home from work that wasn't working, and I took it to pieces and tried to fix it. I failed. I didn't fix it. But, Lego was a big part of my life when I was a kid. That kind of taking things apart, putting them back together, what can you create, was definitely intuitive to me. And I think the funny thing is when we started getting kind of recognized and spoken about as thought leaders and things, it felt a bit odd because I didn't go out with any set intention of trying to do something. I'll be perfectly honest, I started a business. I wanted to make my life easier and find something that would work for clients. And I was Googling around, searching, and this is kind of typically how it's doing. It's just thinking about how do you make this thing better? That is that kind of curiosity thing for me. I would say it's incredibly hard in our industry because most accountants, bookkeepers are swamped. There's too much work. We're not charging enough money to give ourselves the breathing space to reflect. But it's in that reflection time, you've got to build in time to step away from the work. Boiling frog analogy, I don't know if you know that one, the idea that if you have the boiling water and with the frog in it and you slowly boil the water, the frog won't notice. If you boil the water and chuck the frog in, it would jump out. And I think far too many of us as accounting firms, we're in the boiling water. You've got to find time to get out the pan and just have a look back and say, okay, this is taking me way too long. How do I make this easier? How do I make this easier for clients? How do I, try and put yourself in the client's shoes? That's the thing we try and do all the time. We're selling reassurance. What reassurance do they need? And so it's taking steps back, and it's then looking at solutions. And I'll be completely honest, I'm very vain. I always pick the prettiest software. So you guys can take from that whatever you will about Firmcheck, but if the software you choose is attractive, has great UX and is easy to use, you will use it. If it's ugly and it has barriers in the way, you won't. And so weirdly with Xero, one of the big reasons I picked it, the way it looked, Carbon, when we moved to Carbon, picked Carbon because it was prettier than all the other CRM kind of workflow tools. You spend all your day sat in front of a screen working with stuff, make it as nice as you can.
You raised something there that our chairman, Hamish Edwards, original founder of Xero, just get that plug in there as well. It's his number one advice to accountants. He was an accountant himself, and the practice is your number one client should be yourself.
Yeah.
And he'll preach that as much as he can. And again, in my experience, accountants are really good at giving advice and helping other businesses grow, not that good at listening to their own advice. So, that's Hamish's number one, Uncle Hamish's number one tip on the road shows a couple of weeks ago is your number one client is you. And if you put that lens on your own business, then actually you'll probably be all right.
Yep, absolutely.
No, fantastic. Thanks for joining and for all these insights. And yeah, I just loved where the conversation was going. So thank you so much for that. Appreciate it.
Not at all. Thank you for having me on.
Fantastic. Awesome. Hi, Kev. I just wanted to say here as well, actually, so with Firmcheck, that's who we work for, if you didn't know. When you adopt these softwares, just simply paying for a subscription does not make you AML compliant. I wish it would, but that is just simply not the case, unfortunately. So that's why with Firmcheck, we're looking at the ways that we can educate, help facilitate AML compliance in your firm. Even if you don't choose to use us, we're still happy and excited to be a part of that journey. Okay. So the last part of the presentations today is by me, and I'll be covering the AML fundamentals, the histories and laws of AML. This is based on our AML fundamentals course that's in our e-learning page. I want to say, she's actually not here, but our co-writer for the content was a woman called Alina, who was fantastic at getting this together for us, and creating this content was the foundation of my learning on AML. Also want to say thank you to Losing Calathea, who also helped look over this talk. So let me just get my slides up and going. So we've done that. We've had a busy day. And here we go. AML fundamentals, the history and the why. So let me move across. Something just to say about this talk as well. It is very fundamental. This is CDD. This is enhanced enhanced due diligence. In hindsight, when writing it, I was like, oh, maybe this would have been better on day one. But I hope that this just plugs any gaps that you have in your knowledge. So we will cover AML's introduction, history, and the laws that underpin AML. And we'll also cover the key prevention strategies to implement in your firm. The goal is to ensure we have a strong AML understanding to further build on past this point. And as I said, while we've covered far more detailed topics, I just wanted to ensure that there was space for the fundamentals. So let's get underway. Anti-money laundering, or AML, if you didn't know by now, encompasses the policies, laws, and regulations designed to prevent financial crimes. For you as accountants, it's crucial to understand AML, not just as a regulatory requirement, but as a safeguard that protects the integrity of the financial system, your clients, and ultimately your firm. We just talked in that previous session about the mental health elements, the fines. AML measures help in identifying and mitigating the risks associated with money laundering and terrorism financing. So how do we get here? It's 2024 and we're talking about AML. The journey through AML is a tale of evolving strategies against the global finance of crime. So the concept of money laundering is as old as crime itself. When anybody asks me if I find AML to be interesting, this is what I share, and this is one of the only points I find that is quite interesting about AML. But it started with Al Capone. He needed a way to hide his proceeds from drugs, prostitution, gambling, and bootlegging. He's a busy man. So his accountant, Jake Guzik, had to find a creative way to do so. Therefore, he set up laundromats all over the States, so money laundering. Using this model, and other nefarious individuals have adopted and used similar fronts to clean criminal proceeds, blending illicit earnings with legitimate income. Over time, in 2024, this gets more and more sophisticated, and it doesn't necessarily look like laundromats anymore. So let's go over a quick history lesson and timeline of what was put into place on the law side to help mitigate money laundering. And as I said earlier, this is my legally blonde moment, but I did fall asleep in history class in school, so We'll keep this short. So 1970, the Bank Secrecy Act is introduced in the US, which required financial institutions to report large financial transactions. I believe that's where that £10,000 minimum transaction reporting came from. 1989 was also Taylor Swift's birthday, but was the establishment of the Financial Action Task Force by the G7 that elevated AML into a coordinated global response. 1990 was the Financial Action Task Force published its first recommendations, creating the foundation for international AML standards. 1991, I'm still not born up to this point, just by the way, Europe introduced its money laundering directives to prevent the misuse of the financial system for money laundering, and it's been recently updated to include guidance on cryptocurrencies. In 2001, the events of September 11 underscored the connection between money laundering and terrorist financing with the US Patriot Act, which was enacted to combat terrorism financing. And 2002 is when the UK began aligning itself with international AML standards through the Proceeds of Crime Act and the Money Laundering Regulations. These laws provide the robust framework mandating due diligence, reporting of suspicious activities, and adherence to the FATF recommendations. As the world continues to evolve, and new ways to manage money services, and with it, the legality framework will continue to evolve, especially in the face of cryptocurrency and other online transactions. These prove to be fresh challenges for lawmakers to keep up with. So some of the specific laws. So we have the Terrorism Act 2000 outlines offences related to terrorism financing and mandates reporting requirements on suspicions of terrorism financing. The Financial Services and Markets Act of 2000 establishes the FCA and PRA as the regulatory authorities responsible for overseeing compliance with AML requirements. The Proceeds of Crime Act, the one we seem to talk about most often, defines money laundering offences, introduced the concept of tipping off, making it illegal to inform a person that you've reported them for money laundering suspicion. There was a lot of conversation about that yesterday. It broadened the scope of AML efforts beyond the financial sector, mandates a proactive approach to identifying and reporting potential money laundering activities, placing that responsibility on financial institutions, you guys essentially, and non-financial businesses and professions. It sets a legal basis for confiscation and forfeiture of assets derived from or used in criminal conduct. The Money Laundering, Terrorist Financing and Transfer of Funds regulations from 2017 is very wordy, but it specifies preventative measures that must be adopted by those within its scope. Introduces rigorous CDD requirements, ensuring that entities know with whom they are doing business, which we will be covering in further detail and is a point of contention. It requires the establishment of risk-based policies, controls, procedures, including the appointment of a nominated officer responsible for compliance oversight and reporting suspicious activities. David covered this yesterday as well on what this can look like for your firm. And emphasize the importance of ongoing monitoring and scrutiny of business relationships. The last one, I promise. The Sanctions and Anti-Money Laundering Act of 2018 provided the legal basis for the UK to impose sanctions and AML measures post-Brexit, allowing the UK to continue to meet international obligations and implement AML measures independently of the European Union. Whoa, what a lot. There's a lot in there that can trip you up, and a lot that gets updated regularly. In one of the talks tomorrow, I talk about setting up Google alerts, which is really good for when these new updates come through on these legal frameworks and anything else AML related to. So it is really important to review the requirements imposed by your individual industry body. Each body has different criteria for what they deem sufficient. So it's important that you also tick their boxes. In your workbooks at the back, there is additional links and resources, including the CCAB money laundering guidance for the accounting sector. And let's begin to look at the tools to apply this guidance to the real context and the day-to-day activities of your firm. So your AML prevention strategies will look different depending on the size of your firm. And that's where some of the conversations have come about of a single person firm. Do they need to employ a full-time MLRO? What does it look like at the different levels? And the AML maturity framework aims to highlight what should be required. You're doomed to fail, honestly, if you try and copy and paste another firm's framework. And it would be fantastic if everyone would be on the same page, but unfortunately, the industry bodies have different opinions on how to manage it, depending on who you're with. It's important to review the type of clients and therefore the amount of risk you're willing to accept, the amount of staff you have, and the existing controls you have in place to determine the level of control you need on your AML process. Using and understanding the Firmcheck maturity model is a great place to start, resulting in you clearly identifying where your firm sits in maturity and provides recommendations and strategies to implement on following stages. So let's just do a quick rapid fire on what each metric truly means. So the risk assessment is the compass that guides all your AML efforts and truly one of the most important documents you can have for your firm. In Firmcheck's recent report, it was noted that 30% of firms didn't have a client risk assessment in place and 28% didn't have a firm-wide risk assessment either. By evaluating the likelihood and impact of money laundering risks associated with specific clients, sectors, or transactions, you can tailor our prevention strategies accordingly. So this involves identifying potential risk factors, such as the client's business activities, the countries they operate in, and the complexity and the volume of their transactions. A comprehensive risk assessment framework enables us to allocate our resources effectively, focusing on areas of the highest risk. The risk assessment will review the compliance, operational, financial, and reputational risk your firm can be exposed to. It is a truly good idea to review your risk assessment annually. This is to ensure that the clients you've obtained over that year still meet the level of risk you're willing to accept, but the landscape in which you operate may have changed, say, with the introduction of cryptocurrencies. David Winch hosted an awesome workshop at the beginning of the summer on how to write a risk assessment. If you're needing further guidance, that's a great place to start. In addition to the following points, you will need to detail them in your risk assessment. The recording for yesterday has been shared in the chat and will be shared again by the end of the day for yesterday's session. So the internal controls and procedures, so that involves establishing these. I would describe this as your battle strategies against money laundering, with your risk assessment being the overall manifesto. These are the actions that you'll take when faced with each situation. So these include setting up clear policies for accepting clients and conducting transactions, implementing systems for reporting suspicious activities, establishing an AML compliance officer role within your organization or similar if you're in a smaller firm, regular training for staff to recognize and handle the detection of money laundering or terrorist financing activities. I would implore firms to ensure that where appropriate, staff of all levels in your firm are aware of the policies and procedures that you undertake in your AML compliance. This is safety in numbers, so if multiple people in your firm have eyes on the target, you'll never miss. Customer due diligence. There was a few questions around this today. So this is the heart of AML. It's akin to knowing your friends, not just by their names, but understanding their stories. This is done through obtaining documentation from the client that verifies their identity and relevant addresses. The approach I would take here is obtaining enough documentation that another person within your firm would be able to look at and be able to also identify that individual. Documents can include passport, driver's licenses, or individuals and or registration documents for the companies they're involved with. If you've not met the client in person or over a video call, it would be wise to conduct a video call at minimum to meet them, just to verify the photo that they've given on their documents, or conduct a biometric check, which you can do within Firmcheck. Software solutions are wise to implement here. Most have the ability to conduct and store these checks for you, rather than the alternative that we've seen of manually obtaining the documents and conducting Google searches. CDD is not a one and done action. Firms often do well to complete CDD when onboarding the client, but often don't seek to do it again. Lack of ongoing CDD is the #1 compliance failure for the last 5 years by ICAEW auditors. The client's business and circumstances will likely change over time. Your due diligence needs to capture and record these changes. Another element is verifying the client's transaction patterns and sources of wealth in an effort to understand their spending behavior. Here, you will form a baseline from which you can determine differences in spending in the future, but also assess if their spending patterns are consistent with legitimate activities. A point that needs to be emphasized here is you need to complete CDD on all your clients, including people you consider your friends and those that you do ad hoc work for. It is not worth risking your business over, and it is often those you know who will look to leverage your trust and services for nefarious purposes and will use your trust against you. Enhanced due diligence, or EDD, is reserved for high-risk scenarios requiring a deeper dive. This could involve politically exposed persons or transactions involving high-risk countries. EDD is not just a step further, it's a magnifying glass that reveals the details of financial transactions, ensuring that we're not unwittingly aiding illicit activities. You would deem who requires this based on your firm's risk assessment. The activities conducted under EDD are similar to that of CDD, but are far more advanced and determined within that risk assessment. These can include obtaining documentation on source of funds and sources of wealth, enhanced scrutiny on businesses and business relationships, investigation of private and public information, for example, a news article, increased ongoing transaction monitoring, checks and approvals. For example, you may direct within your firm-wide risk assessment that individuals of a high-risk level may require to be checked every 6 months rather than annually, but that's up to you to determine. I'm not advising you to do that. Ongoing monitoring, we've heard quite a bit from Firmcheck. So just to clarify, it means keeping an eye on financial transactions of our clients to ensure they remain consistent with our knowledge of that client, their business and their risk profile. You would likely determine the need for ongoing monitoring on clients of a high risk level. This is done in an effort to spot changes in spending patterns, to investigate the likelihood that they're nefarious. I love that word, nefarious. It's a dynamic process, adapting as new information comes to light, ensuring that our defenses against financial crime remain robust. You can use software to do this, but I suspect for most accountants, conducting this manually would be sufficient. Reporting suspicious activities, or SARS, to the relevant authorities is a legal requirement and a moral obligation. It involves filing the SAR to the National Crime Agency in the UK, detailing any transactions or behaviours that raise red flags. It's a critical step in alerting law enforcement to potential financial crimes, allowing them to take the necessary actions to investigate and prevent illicit activities. The reporting of suspicious activities isn't something firms undertake day to day. I certainly hope not. But this could be a good prompt to check with your team, ensuring that they're aware of that process and, more importantly, what's considered suspicious and constitutes a SAR. Training and awareness. Our theme for today, knowledge is our greatest weapon in the fight against money laundering. Not only a requirement that all relevant staff have frequent training on the topic, it's valuable to ensure everyone is aware of the latest regulations, understanding the signs of money laundering, and knows how to proceed when they detect suspicious activity. It is with great pride I can share that in the Firmcheck report, 45% of firms surveyed complete AML training more than twice a year. Awareness extends beyond the professional sphere, and it's about creating a culture where protecting the integrity of the financial system is a shared responsibility. Well done on being here. It's a great first step. And as it's been mentioned a few times, Firmcheck has several e-learning courses and blog resources. You can also reach out to our partners for additional guidance, but it's good practice to keep up to date with AML regulatory changes and reports. Collaboration and information sharing, lastly, and we've seen a lot of this in the chat today, and it really does make my job awesome. I get a real good kick out of seeing you guys talk to each other, but it is critical. AML is a hushed topic in the industry. People don't want to raise their hand and admit they don't think they totally understand and worry about their compliance. And when we've met people in person, it's often a hushed conversation in the corner of the event. But by creating a culture of transparency in the industry, we can all share knowledge to strengthen the walls against money laundering. It's an element I'm most passionate about and the idea from which we created the summit. So, in conclusion, our exploration of anti-money laundering principles today highlights the critical importance of establishing a solid foundation of AML knowledge within your firm, from the historical evolution of AML measures to the intricate web of laws and regulations that shape our current practices. We have journeyed through the essential aspects that underpin the fight against financial crime, but most accountants may not come across money laundering individuals in the checks they are conducted, and it's easy to become complacent and say, why is it my problem? But within United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, estimating that the amount of money laundered globally could be between 800 billion pounds to 2 trillion pounds each year, it's important to stay vigilant. AML is not just a regulatory requirement, but a fundamental responsibility towards safeguarding the integrity of the financial system and protecting your clients and firms from the effects of money laundering. Amazing. Cool. I didn't see any of you through that whole thing, so it's nice to see back in this chat. How was that? Did we learn anything new? Is there any questions that we have? Perfect. Cool. So get out your workbooks. Where are we at? Have a think. Is there anything that you want to note down that you learned from Raedan about how they go about their AML requirements? Cool. Perfect. Now we're near the end of the day. So this is the point where I'm going to invite Lucy from Calathea onto the stage. Throughout the day, she's been collecting some of your Q&A questions. And we will be able to answer that in this session here. If you are able to put some questions in, was there anything that I wasn't clear about just in that talk? Is there anything that you want more guidance on? Shoot it away now. So we'll invite Lucy to the stage from Calathea. I'm getting a in motion signal from the side. Nikki, will the chat be available to view after this? My office is very busy and noisy, so I would like to catch up. The chat won't, unfortunately, just because it has people's emails attached to it. But the questions that we see from this chat will be shared in a document with the answers at a point after the summit. Is there any other questions? Fab, thanks, Nikki. Just waiting on Lucy. Is Kev around? Kev always has some nuggets to say. Hi.
I'll never reject our invite to show off.
To chat.
Just a couple of things. Here's Lucy coming. Just a couple of things that were on the chat box, and it got us sort of speaking behind the scenes here. I think Margaret put something on that, you know, for sole practitioners, you know, we've done a big chat with Jonathan, and even this kind of theme of today is like share best practices and be open about AML. Don't keep it in yourself and things like that. But that can be quite hard if you've not got any staff and you work from home. Like certainly, me and you, Sophie, we work from remote, and we do feel that lack of colleague engagement, just leaning over, talking to each other. So Yeah, Margaret, you gave us a fantastic idea, and off the back of it, we're thinking, well, should we do more peer-to-peer groups and just have really informal sessions and community groups like that? So if you're interested in that, pop that in the chat. Someone else mentioned a Facebook group, which I know is really popular in the UK, Facebook groups. So perhaps we could look at doing something like that. So we are listening, and you've some people have set some wheels in motion already. So yeah. This is a learning experience for us as well as you. So please, we want to sort of deliver what our clients want as well.
Yeah.
Lucy is here. I was hoping to ask your business colleague what it is Calathea does. I want to give you that test, but I suppose I should ask you again, Lucy, just to see if you give me the same answer as yesterday. What is Calathea and what do you do?
Calathea. So we are a firm that offers AML support to bookkeepers and accountants, mainly in the form of audits. So we come in and check where you are and benchmark your compliance as it currently stands. Much like a supervisory body, we come in and inspect, but we don't send out any fines at the end of it. We help you put everything right. We offer AML training, support, consultancy. So if you need help writing your policy and procedure document, we will help you do it. We won't do it for you, but we will help you do it. So we'll do a bulk of the work, but big input from yourselves. I think that's probably, hopefully, the same answer as I gave you yesterday. I did see on the chat somewhere where someone said the AML trainers don't tend to be trained themselves. Well, that's possibly true in some cases. Mike and I both have do have qualifications with the Institute of the International Compliance Association. So we are trained, as you would hope that we were if we were offering expert advice.
And just the final thing for me before I drop off for the 5 minutes is we've had some questions about the demo later. Is it the same as the demo that I done yesterday? Quite possibly. I might concentrate on the client aspect rather than the prospect, but it's the same functionality. But you'll see me trying to do the same thing as I done yesterday, like Lucy's just done, and probably fail, probably forget parts in that as well. And then just the second thing, again, behind the scenes, we've seen quite a lot of people try to sign up to Firmcheck as a product themselves and think that they're actually signing up to our education platform. So we will post the e-learning education platform just on the screen there on your left-hand side, just in case that you were expecting log on to the education platform and not getting it. So some people were really keen, went through our website and signed up, but what you're actually signing up to is the product. There's our e-learning platform there, and I will be quiet, disappear for a couple of minutes and let Lucy take the stage.
Yeah. No, if you want to sign up for Firmcheck immediately, great. But no, that's likely not the case. You're likely trying to, sign up for our education platform. Hey, Colin, regional physical meetings would be great over coffee, of course. We have a side chat going on of the ideas that you guys are giving us, and it was just put in there that we may be thinking about that. We would love to meet you in person. But Lucy, hi.
Sorry, I was late.
No, you're okay. No, you're so fine. So questions, shoot them through. I have been all in the source today, so I haven't had a look and collated any, but you received the questions from yesterday. I just want to footnote here that we are checking the questions and answers in the chat. We are going through them post and just making sure that those community sourced answers are correct. And Lucy will get in touch with some of you on your questions if they're not answered here. Is there any that you've spotted today that you wanted to bring to light and discuss?
Yeah, hold on. Let me just, I'm looking at a second screen. So actually, no,
Okay.
it's up in front of me. So let's have a look what I've just pulled out. I think it's important, at the beginning of yesterday's session, there was a lot of talk on where people sat on that gradient, the 1 to 5. And when asked why they thought they were at a particular spot, some of them said some responses were like, we're very careful who we take on. We have done webinars and things. All great answers, but you do need to make sure that you are looking at more than just who you're taking on. Do you have those policy and procedures written down? Those are the kind of things that the inspectors will look at if if your supervisory body comes in and sees whether you are doing things correctly. So it's more than just who you take on and that you're doing your checks on them. It's all the background administration as well.
Yes.
I'm getting a bit of feedback with the sound. I don't know if other people are, so I'm sorry about that.
I can't hear anything.
Oh, brilliant.
I can hear you, but I can't hear the feedback.
I'll ignore hearing myself come through as well then. Okay, brilliant.
So I just had Debbie. She goes, all caps. Lucy, do you sell templates for us to adapt so that we can save money? So yeah, I'll leave you to answer.
No, is the brutal answer to that. We understand that they would be really lovely for people to have and that it's a real want, but where you've got a template that you are using, you're at risk of not adapting it to your own practice. As David said yesterday in his session, people are inspected and they have used these off-the-shelf templates and they are not personalized to your firm, and therefore you are not compliant. You are not looking at the risks that are relevant to your practice and the way that you are going to mitigate them. So if you take an off-the-shelf one, which there are some available, you need to make sure that you really drill down into it and make sure that it is relevant to your practice and that you can really justify how you have adapted it, how you, and the bits that you haven't adapted, that they are right for you to anyone that comes in and inspects. So no, we don't do it because we really believe in personalizing something to you and actually building it from the bottom up rather than looking at it from the top and trying to pull it apart and then put it back together. So I think actually in the end it's a cost saving to potentially spend a little bit more upfront to get it right.
Totally. And we just had a question. What about templates provided by governing bodies? I'll get Firmcheck just to chuck some templates that we have in the handout section and maybe some links to the governing bodies that have published those. I believe ACCA is the most transparent.
I think lots of them do. And again, they are all of a very varying I want to say quality. That's I won't say when one's better than another, but if you look at the client risk assessments templates that different bodies put out, some have 70 questions and some have 10. Now, are you going to be looking at your client at the same level if you're using that 10 question one as you are with that 70 question one? Is 70 questions all relevant to you? It's a really tough one. So there are templates with your firm-wide risk assessment and your policy and procedure thing. I think that's more important that they are really your own documentation. So I would be wary of using templates for those unless you are really confident with how you are adapting them for your practice.
Totally. I think that's one of the clearest things that we're trying to talk about with this summit and the AML maturity model is that everyone is going to have a different version of what they need for their business. Not every accountant specializes in cryptocurrencies or specializes in clients that are software companies like Alex. So like everyone is different. So it is impossible to copy and paste a template across all. It is frustrating, but you do need to dedicate that time.
Is it possible to go back to one other thing that I noticed yesterday, going through the questions from yesterday? There was one on suspicion and disengaging with your client. And there was comments on how you do that without tipping off your client. So tipping off offence is when you let your client know indirectly or directly that there might be an investigation against them, so that you have reported them. Now you have to be really careful not to do that. You could end up with a prison sentence if you do that. However, with disengaging, you have two choices: one to disengage and one not to disengage. There is nothing in the requirements that mean you have to disengage with your client. So if you are disengaging, yes, you need to find a way you do it without tipping them off. So think of you're remodeling your business and that client no longer fits into your desired portfolio. That you could risk trying to quadruple your fees, but there is the risk that they would say, oh yeah, sure, and sign that fee increase. So be careful about doing it. Now, if you don't want to disengage, absolutely fine. But if you find that you become suspicious again of something else, then you need to keep on reporting. So you need to put in a SAR. For a client that you keep engaged, you need to re-risk assess them. Obviously, their risk rating is going to go up. They're now probably going to be high risk. You need to apply enhanced due diligence and be wary and more meticulous in how you deal with them. So extra scrutiny. Then there was talk about DAMLs, which is a defense against money laundering. Now, if you know that you are going to be transacting illicit funds, then you need to have permission to do that. What you don't need permission for, and there was a bit of confusion, is to carry on working for them. So that is your choice. But if you are going to be handling those funds, you need a defense so that you are not laundering money. And we can give more information on that. I'm not going to go through it because it's a bit hefty. The other thing, there was one final point, was that if you carry on working for them, you can carry on charging. That doesn't have to be for free. And there's a bit of confusion over that as well.
If I'm at zero knowledge when it comes to this, so I apologize for the viewers if this is like, come on, you should know this. But if I start suspecting someone and I suspect that I might need to submit a SAR, or they've flagged some, they've flagged, I'm just a little bit concerned. Is it a function within the industry bodies that I can be like, hey, friend, I've got this, how do I handle it? Or is that not on them? Is it you needing to reach out to, say, Calathea, David Lynch?
Absolutely. So what you can do, so the first step is you begin to find that there's a bit of suspicion there, but you're not sure whether you've got a suspicion. Write an internal report, whether you're a sole practitioner or you're a staff member of a large firm. Write the internal report. The MLRO, which might be yourself, so you might be writing a report to yourself, needs to review that and decide whether there is a suspicion. As part of that decision process, you might want a bit of advice. Now, you are able to talk openly about that suspicion with the member of staff that initially suspected, with your supervisory body, or with the NCA. Now, what you could do, if you are not comfortable talking to them, you could come to someone like us, the Calathea Solutions, but you mustn't tell us who it is. So you could talk through the kind of theory of it, because you don't know how connected we might be with them. So I'd be really uncomfortable with you just spilling your guts. I mean, we would keep it confidential because that is what our work is about. However, you need to protect yourselves. So supervisory body, NCA, the member of staff that raised it in the first place. Those three are safe.
Awesome. Just to clarify that, because, from seeing the chat, there's a lot of sole practitioners, a lot of accountants that just work on their own. So where is that friend? Sometimes it's not always industry bodies. Sometimes it's something like this. So
and again, you could discuss in theory, but you just have to be so careful.
Yeah.
So I would really recommend supervisory body. Again, probably harder if it's HMRC, but if you've got a professional body, they'd definitely be able to help you.
Fantastic. One of the things I noticed from yesterday that I would want to just quickly cover, and hopefully covered in just the talk I did on client due diligence. Who do I do it on? How often do I do it? What does it look like? Do I do it once and then I never do it again? Just give me a wee bit of an overview of what that means, which I feel like is the same for most firms, like that you need to do it.
Yeah, so you're looking at who controls the business. So let's start with a sole trader. You need to get ID from them. You need to identify and verify them. So a photographic ID and proof of address. And then you need to make sure that it actually belongs to them. So video call, an online verification check, like through Firmcheck, where you've got the biometric check. Great. So you're proving who they are. With a limited company, you're looking at all directors. So you need to identify and verify all directors and persons with significant control. So that's anyone holding over 25%. Now, if that is another corporation, you need to drill down to get to the ultimate beneficiary owners. And you need to do the same process with them. You also, with a limited company, need to check the all the certifications. So look at the certificate of incorporation and that kind of thing, and just Then on all of those, I'm gonna just stick with those two for the moment. If you've got a partnership, you need to do both partners or all the partners. So that's your identification and verification. Now have a look online, do an online search for them, look for some adverse, if there's any adverse media, check that what they're telling you adds up. So you want to get to know your client and understand your client. So it's both of those, who they are, what they do, how they do it, so that you are then in a position when you start working for them to know what's not normal for them. So it really helps if you've got lots of clients in the same kind of industry to kind of benchmark them against each other. Is one getting massively more profit than the other without doing anything different? So it could be red flags just because you're comparing with another. Risk assessments on all your clients as well, as you said earlier.
Yeah. So
actually going on from that, you said, how often do you need to do it? Sorry.
No, yes.
You need to review that at least annually. So you need to verify and risk assess them. And then, of course, with the risk assessment, you don't know what level of client due diligence you need to do until you've risk assessed them. So you might do your normal standard due diligence and then risk assess and realize they're high risk. You need to apply enhanced due diligence. So you might need to go back to them for more information or refer to your processes as to what you do. You then need to review them at least annually. Now, if you know there's a change within the year, you need to do an event-driven review of them. So it might be more frequently. If you change your services to them, if you know they've moved house, you need new proof of address. If the documentation needs to be kept in date. So if you have some photo ID that's going out of date within the year, you need to get new photo ID in. You don't necessarily need to re-risk assess them, but you need to make sure that documentation's kept up to date.
Mm-hmm.
I think that answers the question.
I have one more question. I don't know why it's here. Are you here for your demo?
No, I've actually got a question as well.
Well, I'll ask quickly and then you can. CDD, I've got a picture of their driver's license or a photocopy. And they're giving me a utility bill. Is that enough? Have I ticked that box?
Do you know that documentation actually belongs to the person you've spoken to?
That's a question.
That's a big question, isn't it? And I know there was talk about AI and deep fakes and things on the chat. So those biometric checks are really useful to check they are who they say they are. Some people will do a video call and ask their client to hold up the ID next to them so they can see that it looks the same. You need to convince yourself that the person is who they say they are. Now, actually, you might have a client that has no photo ID. And as long as you are happy that they are who they say they are, you're satisfied. So if you've got, we find this with agricultural secretaries who do bookkeeping. Often they'll have farmers who don't have a passport because they don't have time to go away. And they are often, some of them are older, so they might have the old non-photo driving licenses, but they'll have a shotgun license. They'll have other documentation. So you just need to gather enough to justify your decision and that you are satisfied they are who they say they are.
Yeah, it's enough to be able to say without a shadow of a doubt, this person is who they say they are. Yeah.
And you've got to, and the regulations say this throughout, you've got to apply a risk-based approach. And you need to justify any decisions you make in alignment with your risk-based approach.
Margot, hopefully I've gotten that right today. I'm assuming Margot Robbie vibe. So just a quick yes or no on this one, since Kev's got a question. Zoom call to check the ID. Do you need to take a screenshot to prove that you've done a Zoom call with them? Is it enough just to say you've done one?
It's prudent to do one because then you can actually prove it to an inspector. It's not written in any rules that you have to, but if you don't have proof, how did it happen?
It's just your word, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Kev? Oh yeah. Sorry. Yep. Kev?
Yeah, my question, it actually came in earlier this morning, so we might have bypassed it, but I suppose this goes to firm wide and potentially when we spoke about, asking your team to be responsible. But what should a firm, and is it in the sort of regulations, if you like, that you're also doing checks internally on your own staff? Is that part of the regulations? You know, because if someone's going to commit fraud, it could be internal sort of fraud as well.
So we're actually putting together more information on insider threat because it's there, isn't it? So yeah, part of the regulations is that you screen your employees to make sure they are qualified to do the work they're doing and that they are fit and proper people. So that could be gathering certificates of qualifications. Some firms will do DBS checks, basic DBS checks on their staff to make sure they've got no unspent convictions. Others will put the onus on the staff member to attest to having no convictions and that they will inform you should they, because you've got 30 days to inform your supervisor if there's a reason that you as a director or as a supervised person can't be supervised.
Amazing. Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much, Lucy. So just affirming again, if your question wasn't answered, we will take these, collate them, answer some of those more specific ones that might be to your firm. And yeah, we will get to answering all of them, I promise. But thank you so much again today for joining us. You'll be here again tomorrow. You're doing the slog this week. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Oh, no, great to have you. Awesome. So we'll move you off the stage. Hello, Kev. We're near the end of the day. So day 2, if you'd believe, as soon as the camera comes on, I leave my body. And then when it comes in, I'm back again. I'm like, wow, we really covered a lot again today. So you have just had the AML Summit survey pop up for you there. This is the first time that we've done anything like this. So we really want to hear from you what you think. Did you like the content? Did you find it relevant? Anything of that sort, pop it in there. It was really lovely actually yesterday for the team back in New Zealand as well to be able to look at these feedbacks and be like, actually, yeah, we're doing cool stuff. But also the TNT break, I'm sure everyone really valued that today with the comedy skit. Okay, so I'll just quickly share the presentation again. So awesome. Before you go, would you like to hear more about Firmcheck? Yes, definitely. But I want to show you the plan for tomorrow. So tomorrow is actually our most subscribed to day. We are covering your roadmap to AML compliance. So we have Kaylee from Tularoo. Are your services leading to non-compliance? Do you have all your documentation up to date with FYI? We have Kevin Heaton, so Kev and Kev on a Fireside chat. And Kev will then be doing building an AML process. I will cover managing your AML like a project manager. That is more akin to my background, is project management. So fantastic. For today, don't forget your work books and write down some things that you want to action. So what you want to action immediately that you believe are leading to non-compliance, and what you want to action long-term. We'll cover those in your last talk for tomorrow. Am I missing anything, Kev?
No, I don't think so. I think just keep the engagement high. Everyone seems to really be bouncing off one another and learning from each other. But no, tomorrow you're going to hear from other vendors, but you're going to hear from us quite about practical tips on what to do. So no, I think we're completely buzzed and stoked. Interesting to see what you pull out the bag for the TNT session tomorrow. I think that's literally what I wrote down. How are you going to follow that? So I'm looking forward to maybe you're going to write a song. Maybe I think there was talk of you singing an AML inspired song.
No, I went to a Scottish Christian boarding school on a farm in New Zealand, and no one wanted to sit next to me when it was time to sing choirs. So I will not submit the accounting community to that atrocity. I'll have a think. The stand up went down well. We'll try have a think there. But no, fantastic day. Thank you so much for attending again. If you've been with us for the 2 days, and I hope to see you for the 3rd day. Feel free to invite your friends along to day 3. We'd love to see them too, and then you get to collaborate and confirm what you want to action in each other's firms and have ideas and all that stuff. I'm going to leave the stage now, leave Kev behind to demo the Firmcheck product and software of how to make your firm AML compliant with Firmcheck. Yesterday, loved. Someone in the comment section said, "What is Firmcheck?" right at the end of the day, and that just actually was awesome. The summit is in an effort to help educate and inform about AML. It's not about necessarily selling Firmcheck. And as I said, if you use something else for your AML compliance, amazing. But if you want to look at Firmcheck, Kev's your guy for that. So I will see you all tomorrow. Thank you for joining, and I'll leave you with Kev.
Thank you, Sophie, and hello again, everyone. I think there was a couple of hundred on the demo yesterday. If you've seen it, then feel free to drop off. If you have to drop off just now, we do have a demo link in one of the areas here. I can post it again in the chat box, and we can have a one-on-one demo just now. I'm fairly thick-skinned as well, so if you have any feedback or questions as we go through it, there they are. There's the demo link there, so feel free to book your own private session. And like I say, as we go through, please just drop any comments and questions, and if I think it's super relevant, I will answer them as we go along. If I'm going to answer it later on, I might not just pick it out and try and get this over and done with in the next sort of 20 odd minutes. So I've logged into Firmcheck. What we're trying to do is be a standalone AML platform to help you manage your AML compliance needs. We're cloud-based. You can log on anywhere in the world as long as you've got a browser and log on and that kind of thing. And yeah, like I say, we're trying to be that standalone model to help you onboard new clients in a really compliant and efficient way, but manage that ongoing assessments and ongoing obligations that everyone's really been speaking about in the last couple of days there. Okay, so I've logged into Firmcheck. You'll see on the left-hand side, we've got this yellow bar. If you are interested in Firmcheck, we'll set this up for you. We'll set your users up as well. And what I'll do today is exact same as yesterday. I'll go through the process of adding a new prospect. Now, a lot of firms might not be growing, or maybe only add 1 or 2 prospects a month. We do have the area for your existing clients, and the functionality is exactly the same. We can help you migrate all your existing clients onto Firmcheck for you. We can bulk upload them, and we can also take all your historic documentation, ID information, risk assessments, that kind of thing, and get them into the software for you. We do not charge for that. We do know it's a time-consuming task, so let us know if you need that help and support. I will be coming back to this area once I onboard the prospect, if that's okay. So left-hand side, prospects again, and we'll go ahead on the right-hand side and add a new prospect. We can manually create this, so you can go ahead and manually create an individual, company, trust, partnership. And we've had a few questions about overseas clients. At the minute, the overseas clients would need to be manually added to the software. You just pick what country that they're from and add that this way. And then at the bottom, you've got import from another system. So if I just pop Firmcheck in here, you'll see us at the very top, Firmcheck Limited, and hit add. Give it a second or so for the integration to kick in. And what we've got here in the associated parties is the directors of Firmcheck. So you may have heard me earlier in referencing Hamish quite a bit. Hamish Edwards, one of the original founders of Xero. Firmcheck he's the chairman, executive chairman of Firmcheck. You've got Nigel there that used to be involved that's no longer active. We can filter that out to the active only members, which is Hamish here. And also right at the top, you've got the direct link to Companies House as well. Why do we put that? You might want to dig in for a bit more information. You might want to see the people there and just confirm that they are who they say they are. Coming back to the firm check, we're on the profile stage at the minute. So again, this is just probably general workflow information for you to put in. You've got contact information, general details are all there. You see we pull through the address from Companies House that's registered. Coming down to client admin, this is your opportunity to do a little bit of segmentation internally. So if you work in different teams, you know, perhaps you may have a corporate finance team or outsourced finance director team, bookkeeping team, that kind of thing, or different offices around the UK or in different locations, you can segment that way. Partner and manager, we do have an approval and review process built into Firmcheck. So the partner could be your MLRO, it could be the senior partner in the firm who will be approving this prospect or approving the ongoing CDD. And the manager is who does the day-to-day sort of work or who's collating that information there. So again, it's just a bit of internal segmentation. It'll help you find clients in Firmcheck that easier. You'll be able to filter out on certain names, that kind of thing. So we'll hit update, and then we've got services here. And what services is, and you know, as Lucy and David mentioned, Calathea, for example, will testify. You know, it's important that you do log the services and the fees that you are doing for each client. It's starting to build the data that will form your firm-wide risk assessment, for example, and also keep a hand on you know, you, and you'll be able to look at your overall risk profile of the practice. So I've just put in a couple of things there. You know, £50 probably far too cheap annually for bookkeeping. It's such an important part of what you guys do, but you get the idea of where I'm going with that. The next tab now is doing the AML and the CFT on the actual business and the associated parties within the business. So what we're going to do here is work down this list, if you like, or tick box area. You know, we've been saying all day not to make it tick box, but you know, that's how we make sure we do everything that's needed to be done. So information about the company, we will pull from the profile area that we've just filled out. Any other notes and supporting documentation? So you could just put, you know, worldwide software legend that Hamish is. How did they become a client? Might have been word of mouth referral. Anything at all that is building the evidence of why this business has come to you, and you know, any generic information that you're doing about the business. Also, my spelling gets brutally exposed when I do demos. Yeah. Whenever you see a blue bar in Firmcheck, this is your opportunity to add documentation. You know, when we go through the maturity model, and when I speak to firms a lot, you know, yes, they're doing AML, but it's scattered all over the place, and some things are in one area and some things are in another. At Firmcheck, we give you the ability to keep this all in-house and all in one place. So you might want to add any files here, old sets of accounts, that kind of thing. External link to their website, again, just proving that they are a real company and you have done that research there as well. So we'll just do that just now. We'll mark that section as complete and move on to CDD candidates. So this is who are we doing the CDD on, and what we're doing here is pulling through all the directors and PSCs from the associated parties. So we've got Hamish here again, and we will just pick the roles that Hamish does in the business and mark that as complete. And now the next area is doing the CDD on Hamish himself. I'm sure his ears are burning somewhere in New Zealand just now. I'm sure he's aware that people talk about all like this. The first area is AML and the CFT relationships, and you would have heard us talking about this quite a bit yesterday about the beneficial ownership information. And again, this is all free typing, you know, areas for you to add your thoughts, add your concerns, add your evidence, what you're doing there on the beneficial ownership. You can add attachments again, like I say, any blue bars to add attachments. Does Hamish have authority, or do you have authority to act on behalf of Hamish? Is it there, yes or no? How do you know if they have links with high-risk countries? I think hopefully our PEPs and sanctions will sort that out, but let me sort of try and address that in a second, Debbie, if that's okay. PEP and personal source of wealth. We run PEP, or we have the functionality to run PEP and sanctions checks on the individuals themselves. And if it was to come back as exposed, you mark that as exposed, put in your additional evidence and work that you've done to do that. If it's not exposed, it will grey out the areas, and no longer necessary. But I'm pretty sure you're all well clued up on how to do that. And then we come to the ID verification bit, and we speak at length about this in almost every session, every Q&A. So how do we approach that in Firmcheck? If you've got the physical copy and most of your existing clients, you've verified their ID already, which is fantastic. What we can do is get that ID into Firmcheck itself. So if we have a driver license, for example, again, just in case Hamish is watching, I will try and be modest with his date of birth. I don't want to get on the wrong side of Hamish there. So his date of birth, 1980, I'm sure you'll be happy about that. When does the ID expire? And just some general information about the ID. How is it verified? Face-to-face or certified copy. And then you can actually go and get that ID wherever you're storing it just now, and store it in Firmcheck. And again, what we hear a lot is, we've got the ID, it lives on a Google Drive, or we've taken a photocopy of it, the paper form lives here or there. At least this way in Firmcheck, all the ID lives in one place. It's stored, it's encrypted, it's secure. So it's just one thing to take off your mind and anxiety that bit. So we've done the passport, the driver license, and the attachments there as well. We can go ahead and add more evidence. So this is where we run the PEP and sanctions checks. And Debbie, I think you're saying, how do you know if they've got links with high-risk countries? If they're on any sanctions list for other countries, it'll show there on the PEP and sanctions. Perhaps not answering the question that you've asked there at all. But there's also a part that you will need to do additional checks out with Firmcheck. I think Lucy's kind of mentioned that you may have to do additional checks out with the software that you've got. We also offer the tool of full biometric verification and PEPs and sanctions. What you would do with that is, if you do not have the ID and you need to collect the ID, perhaps you've got a passport that's expired, or one of your existing clients has ID that's expired, then by all means, you can request that ID via Firmcheck. We will send an email to your client. You don't need to download any apps or anything like that, but we'll send an email to your client. That email will come from you. It won't say Firmcheck on the email. It'll come from your email address. Big blue button is what they press there. Expired passports, can you notify us when it's expired? So I'll show you where that lives. Press a blue button. This is your client now doing this, not you. Press a blue button. Sorry, I'm trying to read the questions there as well. Press a blue button in the email. We will then ask your client to take a photograph of their identification, so driver license, passport, proof of address. We will accept ID from 190 odd countries worldwide, and we will extract the data from that document, so no one's having to input any data, so it rules out the human error sort of this. We will then ask them to take a selfie, and within sort of 5 or 10 seconds, you will get a full biometric report confirming that the ID, that person is who they say they are, that ID is valid. So you heard Lucy the last time saying, how do you know if that document's real or not? That this biometric search does that. And you will also receive a copy of the biometric report there, showing the biometric comparison and also having copies of the ID that they have taken the photographs of. So that is our ID verification process and tool. which is super helpful, especially if you've got clients overseas, especially if you want to have a really slick onboarding process there. So what we'll go back and do is make the determination with Hamish. There, we've got a passport, we're happy enough. Sorry, we've got a driver license, we're happy enough, and we'll come back and get that box ticked. Someone saying, what about elderly clients who don't renew passports or driver licenses? Yeah, good call. And I think Lucy's kind of mentioned that they are, you know, you can take the paper if you've got a copy of an old passport. I think the ICW, you know, if someone's going to fake their ID to you, they've probably done it before. Or sorry, they probably do it the first time they meet you. They're probably not doing it 5 or 10 years later. But, you know, if you do have someone that doesn't have physical copies of ID and date, it's your risk appetite to that. Are you comfortable that this individual says who they are? Could you do additional checks elsewhere? The electoral roll, for example, credit searches, you know, bank statements. You know, this is all about your risk appetite. So again, if I go into the collect and verify, start collecting new evidence, you know, it doesn't need to be a driver license or a passport. It could be other ID that you've got from them. And again, that could be posted there. This is entirely your call. Like, just because you put a passport into Firmcheck doesn't mean that you're compliant. This is kind of your assessment on that. So I hope that makes sense. And also that a deflected accountability there, not too much as well. Working my way down, I'm aware of time. I'll try and be as quick as I can. Still 180 people online, which is fantastic. Source of funds, and again, free typing area. Add any evidence that you might want to do. Source of funds could be bank statements, that kind of thing. And if it's not required, you can untick that box. And then source of wealth as well. Is it relevant or not? So we'll update that. We're working our way down this list on the left-hand side. Risk assessments now, and been a lot of talk about risk assessments, risk assessment templates here. We work with a few of the accounting bodies in the UK, ICW, ACCA, for example. We have their risk assessment templates. We can swap these risk factors out and put in their risk assessment templates. Again, going back to what Lucy's saying, they might not all be relevant for you. No one is asking you to answer all sort of 27 of these risk assessment factors that are here. A lot of your clients will potentially just have none here. But again, that is your assessment of the scenario. And again, we're not asking you to tick all these boxes at all. It's just the ones that are relevant to the client that you're dealing with right in front of you there and then. At the bottom as well, it's also important that you make your determination. We get asked quite a lot of the time of, hey, why don't you automatically do this? But once again, you hear from the experts and the consultants there that this is your determination. This is your risk assessment. It's not Firmcheck's. It's not the ACCA's. It's not the ICW's. Your risk appetite might be completely different. So at the minute, we're asking you to choose that determination. I've got a question there. Can you add questions to the risk assessment area? Yep, you've got this other area. So again, you could pop in questions there. There is also nothing stopping you having a risk assessment document and popping it into this documents tab here at the minute. And then perhaps putting additional queues in docs area. Because again, this is just an area for you to manage all that. So, you know, you could do something like that. We are working on flexibility in these questions and giving you the opportunity to modify that. We don't have that functionality just yet, but look out for that. So I'm going to scroll down and hit update. We've got the tick box there. What level of CDD do we want to do on this client? Is it simplified? Is it standard or enhanced CDD? I'm just going to do enhanced. Why not? Let's do enhanced, and you can put in some notes saying why you're putting them enhanced as well. And then the bottom area is review. So it gives you a little summary of everything that we've just done, and when do we want to schedule the next review. And the reason we kind of do that is if the regular wants to see documents, can you print everything down, send them? Yeah, absolutely. I'll show you where to do that in just a second. So schedule the next review. We will default that to 12 months because your annual obligations are sort of, that's your legal requirements. So we will do that. Again, what the bodies are looking for is if you have someone on enhanced CDD or high risk, that you maybe put that to, hey, I'm going to review this every 4 months, that kind of thing. I'm getting a lot of questions just now about, a lot of firms put this at the client's year end, and can we schedule that towards the year end? Yeah, I suppose so. You could use this area to customize that and say, actually, their year ends in 8 months' time or whatever, and that'll build a workflow, which we'll show you in a second. But in this example, I'm keen to show you what it looks like to review your current clients annually. I'm just going to put that as 1 month, and that'll allow me to show you that workflow process. So we'll hit update. Bear in mind, we're onboarding a new client at the minute. So do we want to proceed or not proceed? Now, this area is not there for your existing clients. So that's just probably the only difference that you would see with your existing clients. You've got documents area here as well. I've already mentioned it. You can drag and drop anything you want. Perhaps you've got additional risk assessment questions. You could perhaps put an onboarding checklist in here. Letters of engagement, anything you want, really, you could do that. We can pop there, and then approval. And again, this is this stage is slightly different for existing clients. They're already your client. You're not sending it away for approval. There is a review process, which I'll show you in a second. But you've got the approval area here. All the information that we've done, all the attachments live here. Someone asked if the regular wants to see the documents, can you print them down? Yep, Debbie, I shouldn't be surprised you're super engaged in this event. Thank you very much. You'll see this export area here. If you click that, what you get is a full PDF summary of all the documentation that you've uploaded into Firmcheck, all your determination, all your commentary, all your quotes, all the associated parties, all the checks that you've done, all live there for each client. And then you can send that to your regulator, or if they're physically in your area, they've got a full PDF summary of everything that you need there. So handy question that you asked. Okay, so we're onboarding a new client. We want to submit this to approval. Can you go back and amend your notes? Yep, absolutely. I'll show you that in a second. We're going to approve this, send this to approval to a senior manager, perhaps your MLRO. You can hit select and add any notes, and away it goes. What will happen now is your does your biometric check ask for 2 forms of ID? Yes, it can do, yes. So we've sent that to Tracy, who's our MLRO in my practice that I've got set up. What will happen is Tracy will get an email from us saying, hey, you've got a new prospect to review, go and improve in Firmcheck. So Tracy has her own login information here. Thank you, Margaret. And you can see at the top here, things to do, review Firmcheck Limited. So in Tracy, we go. Here is all the information that the team who have onboarded this new client has done. Not sharing Google Docs, not sharing physical copies, no Google Sheets, anything like that, spreadsheets. All lives in one place, all monitored here, and all commentary will live in one area. And Tracy can go and approve or reject this new client that we've got. If she rejects it, it will go back to me for that commentary and to deal with any commentary that it has. But if Tracy says, yep, I'm all happy with that onboarding process, she'll approve. And if we go back to the original person's log on, you'll see here it's in review. But if I just refresh Firmcheck here, they are now a client. At the minute, they'll stay in this prospects area purely for an audit trail purpose, but they will also move into the client area. Now, the fact that I've chose Firmcheck is going to bite me in the backside here, because no doubt I will have a few Firmchecks here, because it's not the first time I've done it. Oh, there you go. Well done, past Kevin. He deleted these other ones. So this is the one that I've just done today. Firmcheck right at the top. The date it was determined and the review date. Now, Debbie, can you go back and amend your notes? Yes, you can. If anything was to happen between now and the next review stage, what you would do is you would come in here and edit your CDD. So if you know that a new director's joined the company, if you've got suspicions that there, new risk sort of things that you have to think about, consider. Then what you would do is you would come in here, say the CDD needs updating, that would open everything up again. You could add notes, you could add new bits of ID, whatever it is, it would open everything up again that we've just done. And then you could tick that for approval, and it would go to senior manager again to say that you've done that. Okay, so that's if anything happens between the review process. What happens when we come up to a review process? So I put Firmcheck for a 1 month review. In general, these will all be 12-month reviews, fingers crossed, because that's your legal requirement. Now, what will happen in month 9, so 3 months before the review date, in the undergoing CDD tab, the clients that are up for review will be here. So if I take the filter off of F, here is everyone that's aligned to me is that log on. So I'm logged in as Rod at the minute. So everyone that's under Rod here is up for review. If I had another colleague, they would only see the clients that are aligned to them. So essentially, this is everyone that needs updated in the last 3 months. If you're a firm admin, you'll see everyone in the area, and you can use these filters on the left-hand side to sort that out. But if we go to undergoing CDD now, and now bear in mind, this is us, your existing clients now, they're coming up for their annual review process. You want to do annual CDD on them. What would you do? You've got Firmcheck here. I knew there was more Firmchecks. I think this is the one that we've been doing. So what you would do is they're here for their first review. Yep, I created this today, so I know it's that one. You would click on Firmcheck themselves. All of last year's information is here. All their risk assessments, their ID, everything that you've done last year all lives in Firmcheck. So again, you're not scrambling about getting into it. If anything needs updated, you would just move this to pending decision, and that opens everything up again. So you can see there that actually these 3 aren't relevant anymore. I'm going to put them as low risk. They've been a client for a while, and actually my level of CDD is just going to be standard. Fantastic. You can see that we've updated all of that. Also in the review area here, you will see their expiry dates of their ID, and you can run reports in Firmcheck to look at any outstanding ID that's needed, and then send them that link to renew and do a biometric search. So again, you would come in here, collect and verify, start adding new evidence, and then request new ID. Or perhaps you've got a physical copy and you can just upload that again. So Charlotte, in a second, I'll show you. Wasn't Charlotte asked that? Someone asked that if we run a report on expired ID. So I'll show you where that is in a second. Anyway, okay, so we've reviewed that. We're happy. We want to proceed with this client this time. You can see this workflow slightly different, but we'll default that to 12 months. We'll hit update. You can see now we've got a first review and confirmation. Hey, we're happy with this annual review. We're doing the continuous CDD now. We'll tick this box and hit submit confirmation. And just as before, Tracy will log in as a senior partner. She'll go to her things to do area. She'll look at everyone that's up for second review. She'll tick that box and job done. Now you'll see the third Firmcheck there. I'll delete the other 2 so that tomorrow's demo is a bit cleaner. The Firmcheck that we were dealing with is now no longer in the undergoing CDD, but here they are. That date's just updated to next year. Job done. Happy days. You can export stuff in reports and in Firmcheck. So in terms of that ID verification, you can export a report. There's a column in there that will show you all the expired dates. Again, we're working on a more visual report that you can handle that in Firmcheck itself. That's essentially everything that I've got to show you. I'm aware of time. I'm kind of 1 minute over. I will be running this again. If you want a more in-depth session or answer really specific questions, then feel free to book a one-to-one demo with myself. And like I say, just to reiterate, when it comes to your existing clients, we've got the tools and the knowledge and the resources to get your existing clients into Firmcheck. First of all, look at your existing data, look at your existing documentation that you have, get that onto the software, and then help you manage that moving forward. Okay, so I hope you found all of today informative. I'm glad that there's another 180 people still online for this demo. I hope some of you are not the same people as yesterday, because that meant I failed massively to get my message across yesterday. But I hope you found the whole event useful. Come back for tomorrow. We've got a lot of guest speakers tomorrow from different software companies. We'll be really digging into the practical steps that you can do with building a AML process internally, but also how you manage that. So really looking forward to tomorrow. Thanks for the engagement again, and have a really good afternoon.